Hello, everybody. Here's my papers. Good evening. My name is Jason Grady. I'm acting. I'm the
Acting chairman.
Acting chairman today. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the September 13th meeting of the Inland and Wetlands Commission. It is currently 7:05, and our first order of business, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. So I guess before we get started, I'd like to recognize to the commission that Chairman Michael Muddett has tendered his resignation as he apparently is moving out of town. I was thinking that maybe as a commission or as a town, we should maybe send him a letter of recognition for his service to the Wetlands Commission and Land Use Department. Anybody has any other thoughts on it?
Sounds good.
I would ask the commission to consider nominations for a new chairman, and we will take that up on our next meeting, which is the 28th?
27th.
27th. All right, so roll call, starting all the way at my right. Who's here? Mike left me notes on what to say, and I can't read his handwriting.
Well, they're actually out of order.
They're actually way out of order.
Ross Mastroco is absent this evening.
Ross is absent. Sorry, give me a minute. I'll get through this, I promise you.
Starts with a J.
What's that?
Starts with a J.
You're not on here. I'm supposed to,
Oh, you are not on there yet?
you're not on here, and
Jack's on there?
and he told me to make sure that I say everybody's credentials, and I'm not gonna be able to do that. Commissioner Jeffrey Chalmers, who is an inland and wetlands scientist, right?
Professional wetland scientist.
Professional wetland science,
Certified
scientist,
ecologist.
and I'm sorry, what
Soil
else?
scientist and certified
Certified
ecologist.
soil, okay. What'd he say?
Very impressive.
Jim Stewart, who is a professional engineer and a licensed land surveyor, is that correct?
That's as best as you get now.
Megan Hayden, who is a licensed attorney in the state of Connecticut. My name is Jason Grady. I am the acting chairman or the vice chairman. And Lois Spence, our secretary. Ooh, I'm sorry, Megan Hayden is also our treasurer.
Hey, Meg.
Donna Straczynski, who is the inland wetland and land use coordinator. And Scott Schatzeline, who is a professional engineer, inland and wetlands agent for the town of Monroe, the town engineer. What else am I supposed to say, Scott, about?
That's fine.
That's fine.
And Rebecca.
And Rebecca Wood, recording secretary. I told you I'd bumble it. All right. Before we start, I'm supposed to read our mission statement and how the meeting will proceed. The Inland and Wetlands mission statement is the objective and purpose of the Inland and Wetlands Commission is to provide for the overall protection and preservation of the inland and wetlands water courses within the town of Monroe. In the normal course of our meetings, we will hear public hearings and other applications. The protocol for public hearings is to have an applicant make a representation or presentation to the commission, during which and after which the commission will be asking the applicant questions. The commission will then review town, staff, and other independent comments. The meeting will then be opened up for public comment. I will ask that all comments be made to the chair or the commission. After any and all comments pro, in opposition, or of a general nature are made, the applicant will be given the opportunity to respond. It is not necessary that the applicant respond, but is generally in their best interest to do so. There will be no further opportunity for new questions unless new material is entered in as evidence or testimony during the response. Please keep any and of all comments, pros and cons, specific to inland wetlands related matters. Other applications that do not involve public hearing will follow a similar format with the exception that there will be no public comments allowed. The meeting follows our published agenda, which is on the front table in green, unless otherwise amended. I do not believe there is any public hearings in this meeting, correct?
Do you want to know
Okay.
if there's any amendments to the agenda?
I'm supposed to do that first. See, in the paper it says that's after. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
There are.
Oh, excellent.
And actually, it's really just to take off, let's see, section 5. And under remediation submissions, we are going to take off 8 Maple Drive, because that's going to be something different. And then under item 11, enforcement, section B, remediation submissions, we are, hold on one second, I might be in the wrong spot here. Enforcement. Sorry, I just have to get. Administrative review, sorry about that. We are going to take off 17 Holly Place. And that is all the changes that I have. So it's just 2 removals, no additions.
No additions, thank you. So since there is no public hearings, we will only hear regular applications during which no public comments are allowed. The meeting will follow our published agenda, unless amended. Frank can already do that. Next order of business is the minutes of August 23rd, 2017. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve minutes is written.
Do I hear a second?
I think there's enough people here to.
Well, I watched the video, so it doesn't.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
So second.
Okay.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
Motion made by Commissioner Stewart, seconded by Commissioner Hayden.
Wait, hold on again, I apologize. Who made the first motion, Megan?
Commissioner Stewart.
Jim. Okay. Jim, second by Megan. And vote.
No, any discussion?
Any discussion?
Sorry.
I found, even though I wasn't here, I did listen to the recordings, and there's a typo. There's
Okay.
2 typos that I found,
Go ahead.
very minor ones. One is on the bottom of page 3, have Bill Kenny's with an apostrophe S.
Oh, yeah.
And it's supposed to be just plain Bill Kenny. And on page, there we go. Page 10, at the very top, there's 2 addresses for one application.
You're right.
And I think it's supposed to be just 178 Main,
That
not
is
124
correct.
Enterprise.
Okay.
And that's it.
Anyone else have anything for the good of the minutes? All those in favor of adopting the minutes as with changes that Mr. Spence just pointed out, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstentions.
Any
Abstain.
So 3-0.
Is 3 enough?
For minutes, yes.
Okay. Minutes are adopted, that's vernacular. Okay, there is no application hearing determinations on the agenda, no subdivision report recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission. On to regulated activities, 12-5-A1, 119 Bart Road. Zamatula, I'm sorry if I butchered that.
And it's up on the screen.
Good evening. My name is Jim Swift, professional engineer, landscape architect at 102 Village Drive, Shelton, Connecticut offices. And I was mysteriously absent from the last meeting where we were on the agenda. I was on vacation and I had neglected to let Scott know to table the item, so I apologize to the commission for that oversight and confusion. What we have here is an application for a single-family house that was approved in August of, I believe it was 2012. And in looking to obtain building permit, we discovered that there was an error on the plan. If you look on this section of the plan, you'll see that there's a roof drain galley or infiltrator that was supposed to take the roof drainage from the house. It is going to take the roof drain from the house. And if you'll look up in this corner here, there's a domestic service well. And at the previous application, that well was located very close to the infiltrators. That's a violation of the health code. Wells need to be at least 25 feet away. So having found that error, we corrected the plan. We moved that well to 25 feet away to the new location that you see up where the indicator is. It's farther from the regulated area and meets all health code at this point. When we did file that application to amend the improvement, Scott had done a report, and he pointed out that there was also one other oversight, I think, that in the 2012 approval, which is the commission normally requires that in wetland signs be installed at the limits of disturbance. And you can see that during the revision where I moved the well, I also now indicate where those wetland signs will be. So that's the limit of our application tonight, to amend this approval, to move the well, to add the signs, and I'd be glad to answer any questions the commission might have.
Are the plantings that you have on the outside toward the western part of the property, you have them planted on the other side of the LOD. Are they newly proposed, or were they proposed in the original plan?
They're proposed in the original plan. It's part of the original approval conditions. Oh, and I'm sorry, let me add one more thing. Scott also mentioned that on the original plans there was a shed that was owned by our adjoiner to this side, and the shed was on our property and within the upland review area, and Scott was concerned that adjoiner be notified in a legal sense. That shed has since been removed. So I addressed that on the plan by just taking that shed off the plan. It's no longer there.
Is it in the neighbor's property?
I do not know where they put it. All I know is they removed it from our property, and I didn't see it. I didn't happen to notice if they relocated it, but it's gone from our location.
Can you show me on the plan where the shed was again, to refresh my memory?
It was, the driveway comes into this house here, and the shed was probably right around in this corner right here. And as I say, it was our neighbor's shed, and it was slightly on our property. And part of the conditions of approval in 2012 was that shed be removed from that location.
What was under the shed? Was it on block? Was it
No, I think it might have been on block.
Okay.
But it's been restored. That area has been.
It has been restored.
Yeah.
That's my question.
Well, it's been restored to the extent that the shed's removed, any support that it had has been removed, and it's no longer maintained as lawn by our neighbor.
Is there like a bed of gravel there? We don't know what's there.
I didn't see it. I mean, I didn't feel free to walk onto the property, but it looked like the forest that, was moved in and covered that area, taken that area over. But certainly we would be glad to remove anything that still remains. I mean, you can see from the conditions of approval that are still valid that we have to execute is there's some debris and things over in this area of the site. We're obligated to remove that to do these plantings. So we certainly would be glad to remove anything that remains of the
So if we were to make that a condition of the
yes,
condition,
that would be fine.
Make sure that that's all taken care of. There's nothing just laying around out there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Ask a question.
Absolutely.
Jim, the plan I'm looking at, that was received in June, it's not exactly that, but it indicates, and I'm not sure if it's just the way that you put limits of disturbance under wetlands, but it's basically wetlands limit of disturbance, and then there's a dashed line that goes into the wetland boundary. So I'm trying to understand the limit of disturbance. That was, that
I'm
was,
sorry, go ahead, you can take over.
See if we can get to that area. See if I can.
Go ahead, you can take it from there.
Maybe it is on
Yeah,
there.
Jeff, do you want, these are July ones, do you have a copy of the July 19 ones?
Zoom into that area a little bit.
Do you want to take a look?
Not in front of me, so.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, we chose.
No, no,
Yeah.
no.
So Jeffrey, I mean, this disturbance limit line comes up just where the fence is,
Yep.
up and over. I mean, there are
Oh, yeah,
activities.
it's on there.
There are activities that occur out there, but they're plantings, you know, they're,
But you see how it jogs into the wetland boundary? See it V's in? The limited disturbance.
well, this is the wetland boundary.
Right, the wetland boundary is that thicker dashed and straight line that goes up and over,
Yeah, this one, right here.
right? And right that, go
And this
back,
is-
go back to C15, see wetland flag 15, that circle right next to the planting? See that dashed line that goes into the wetland, down,
Oh, that's contour line.
let's say it again?
That's a contour line?
Contour line?
It's a contour line, but limited disturbance is shown to that. I don't understand how that could be. So the contour line is into the wetland, so are you filling the wetland, or are you?
No, that's an existing contour. Yeah, the proposed
looks
contours
like
are
but-
solid like so. So this 94 line, this is an existing contour.
It looks like a proposed contour line to me.
Oh, you know what, I think I
Yeah,
see what
I know
you're,
what he's talking about now too.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
limited disturbance.
You're right, because it does have an arrow pointing at it saying wetlands limit of disturbance,
It's identified as,
which, it's like it's a
Wasn't going
leftover
crazy.
maybe.
What are you trying to do?
I
He's trying to get
think,
back to the hand.
yeah, I'm trying to get back to that.
The hand's up here,
there's no legend.
okay?
No.
Yeah.
And this is the shrink, so you hit that and you can zoom in. If you want to go back, you hit this,
Yeah.
and it puts it back to the original.
See, it's better on this one.
So
Look
here we
at-
go.
You can see everything's grayed out except for that.
I think I saw what Jeff is talking about.
Now put it on the
Yeah,
hand.
limit of disturbance. Okay,
See
so,
that
so
line?
there's the limit of disturbance. That line is an existing limit of disturbance where, and other things, it's basically the existing limit of disturbance. And you can see how you know, when you come up in this location and you see tires and debris and deposits to be removed in that general area, and then you can see that dashed line, what that dashed line is trying to say is there's been activity in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I can appreciate what you're saying now. There's this little triangle in here that's not a proposed limit of disturbance, it's what kind of had been disturbed in the past. And I think the idea in that triangle there is that the disturbance might have been a tire track or something like that. It's not, you know, at the time in 2012, it was just something that should just, you know, come back on its own. It wasn't worth going in there and trying to regrade it or anything. We do have some plantings in there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was gonna even suggest is you could probably add 2 more nannyberry or something like that. I mean, it's,
We
I was
would
trying to
have
understand
no
what that
objection.
was, if that was a
Yeah.
That-
proposed
Yeah.
limited disturbance in the wetland or not.
In
Yeah.
the original application, when we went out to look at the property, they had disturbed that area when they went in to do their testing.
Yeah. So if you were to suggest a couple more nannyberry, we would have no objection.
So what's the condition of the area now, now that we've opened up this discussion, between the existing limit of disturbance and your existing proposed, not existing, your proposed limit of disturbance? That area has been disturbed. What is its condition at this moment?
Condition of it now is much better because what we did was we seeded it. As Scott said, there was some tire tracks for doing the testing. We were directed to seed that area, the seeds come in, so it's in good shape.
Are there any trees there? Or is it
No.
just, you just planted grass?
And again, this was reviewed in 2012.
Right,
and-
understood. Which Most of the commissioners weren't here at that time.
So just to clarify, you're saying that you're agreeable to marking the line of where the markers are as the proposed limit of disturbance?
Correct.
Is there a fence proposed for that section?
No.
Can I request that we put some kind of, other than wetland markers, if there's grass, if there's just been planted grass back there, the markers aren't gonna mean anything, unless there's an actual line of demarcation. It's just gonna invite the additional water.
Yeah, we're starting to get into to use a term, we're starting to get into relitigating the original 2012 approval conditions. I don't know as the current owner would object to a fence, but I can't volunteer that because my direction is to stick to the relocation of the well, which is the application.
Mhm. Is this a modification of an existing, or is this, the application is a modification application, or is it a new application?
No, it's modification.
It's a modification.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, if your owner would be amenable to boulders or a fence or something like that, it might help us in the future,
Yeah.
prevent possible
I
problems.
understand.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
He might
That's it.
back bill me for the 2 additional
Markers.
plants. I may have to pay for those myself.
I mean, well, if it wasn't permitted and it was an activity that wasn't permitted already, I mean.
Yeah, but it had been reviewed and seen in 2012.
Right, but that activity in the wetlands wasn't approved, was it?
No, but it was.
Okay,
it was-
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, but it was looked at in 2012. They realized that we'd done it and we put the seed in.
That's fine. I just wanted to get a handle on it.
Yep, I
Thank
understand. Yep.
That's it?
Anything further from the commission? Anything further?
That's all I have.
So I guess we are closing the
Donna, have
regular
to,
meeting.
do you have any exhibits that have to be read? So,
No.
okay, yeah.
We will close. Thank you.
Okay.
Set, thank you. Sorry. Coming up next, IWC 2016-04A1, 34 Enterprise Drive, All-Star Transportation. This is an amendment to previous approval regarding water quality basin, removal of amphibian barrier, reduction of pavement area, and revised utility location.
Good evening, members of the
Okay.
commission. I apologize for that slight delay. For the record, my name's Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here in Monroe at 501 Main Street. For the record, I am submitting the proof of certified mailings to the health department and the Quarry and Water Company. With me here this evening is John Kimball. The original applicant who we're talking about is a project located at 34 Enterprise Drive, All-Star Transportation. This project came before the Wetlands Commission back in 2015, and it was reviewed and approved for a bus parking facility for All-Star Transportation. Just to orient everybody, here's an area of Monroe. 34 Enterprise Drive is located as part of the Pepper Street Business Park. Here's an aerial of the site prior to site development, prior to approval. There are wetlands on the property. The project was approved by the commission, and what it included was essentially a large bus parking lot for All-Star Transportation for the school buses for the town of Monroe, and a fueling pad and a small office for the bus company. This project has gone through construction. There were some construction revisions that we had looked at, and we wanted to come before this commission to review some of those. Just to give you guys some history, what you may remember is part of the original approval. When we first came before this commission, we talked about, we initially were proposing to surface this lot with millings. And there was much intensive debate regarding the use of millings on this property. And when we initially started that, one of our water quality measures to provide an additional protection against the possible, the use of millings as a surface area, what we did was we looked at, we wanted to provide additional renovation for any potential stormwater. So one of our considerations was we designed our basin to be wet bottom, so that standing water would actually allow for some additional renovation of the stormwater runoff from the millings itself. During the approval process, we ended up removing millings from the plan, and it was proposed for that surface to be paved. However, we never went and readdressed or changed any of our water quality measures or modifications to the stormwater basin. It's one of the big. I just wanted to run through that with everyone so we could remember those discussions and the impetus as to why we did do a wet bottom basin to address stormwater renovation. So we made a couple of very major minor changes to the site plan. This plan just provides an overlay of showing the changes from a site plan standpoint. We eliminated some additional striping so that there was better references for the buses to know where to park. And there are also very, very minor tweaks to some of the guide rail locations around the property. None of any substantive issue for the Wetlands Commission. From a grading and drainage standpoint, again, as we discussed, initially this was supposed to be millings. Stormwater runs sheet flow through the parking lot into a series of catch basins. In this area here, it runs down this location, runs through a grass-lined swale, and then discharged into a sediment forebay, and then it would meander through the detention basin. And again, we had proposed some modifications to create a wet bottom basin for that additional stormwater renovation. From a modification standpoint, if you recall, part of our previous application included a amphibian barrier around the detention basin to prevent that basin to be considered a decoy vernal pool, since we were acknowledging that we were going to make it a wet bottom basin that had the potential to become a decoy vernal pool. And so we proposed the amphibian barrier. If you may recall, during those hearings, our soil scientists, it was Environmental Planning Services, James Cowan was here, and this was something that we had come up with, but we had not had any experience actually using this in Connecticut. And as we started to do some additional research, actually sourcing these amphibian barriers turned out to be quite complicated. It's something that's used overseas, not necessarily in the United States that often. There's a company out of California, but you have to hire them to actually come out and install it. It becomes very, very cost prohibitive and expensive. So when we were looking at this during construction, we said, well, we went back to the reason we had the amphibian barrier in the first place was because we were creating a potential decoy vernal pool. And the reason for that was we wanted standing water for additional stormwater renovation. So as we were reviewing this, since we've subsequently gone to fully paved surface in the parking lot, the need for that additional stormwater renovation wasn't necessary. And our proposed drainage system still complies with the 2004 water quality manual as provided by DEP. So what we're proposing from a grading and drainage modification is to make some minor grading revisions around the property, very inconsequential, wouldn't have any adverse impact to the wetlands, but also to eliminate that wet bottom basin component of the detention basin, thereby eliminating the potential for that to be considered a vernal pool or a decoy vernal pool, which results in no longer the necessity for the amphibian barrier. So we're requesting to remove that as part of the approved plan from the previous application. Now, we wanted to make sure that, so we proposed some minor modifications to the detention basin to ensure that we still had the adequate stormwater quality volume storage. We also wanted to make sure that it wouldn't possibly have water sit to become a decoy vernal pool. As part of our investigations, we went out and did test pits. We did additional testing to make sure that it does fully drain. We've provided that information to the town engineer. He's actually concurred with our analysis from a drainage standpoint, so we do not see any risk that this could be viewed as a decoy vernal pool. And so we are requesting to remove that amphibian barrier as one of the requirements for this project.
How are you drying the pond out? Are you lowering the outlet, or are you just
No,
increasing the amount of fill you're taking out?
We're increasing the area at the bottom of the pond just slightly to make sure that our stormwater analysis still works and it still achieves the goal of reducing, or it still achieves the goal of providing the storage for the water quality volume, but then it does exfiltrate through the basin. And if you recall, this is actually an existing stormwater basin that services the municipal drainage from Enterprise Drive. And if you go out there, it's dry. Predominantly, there is never standing water, and that's one of the reasons why we felt confident enough that it does fully drain, and we verified that through our testing.
So you're leaving it at the bottom as it is, and you're just gonna make it a little larger?
We did some minor grading revisions to it. Yes, we did. We just very minor to kind of make sure that we had the sustained volume in there as part of our analysis.
And originally you were gonna dig it deeper?
Yeah, originally, so you can see here in black was what was previously approved, and what's red is our proposed revisions. So we actually had the discharge into our sediment forebay, and then it would spill over, and we were creating a berm inside the basin, so the stormwater would kind of create a meandering path through here, and then have a wet portion here for just that additional water quality renovation. As part of our changes, we're essentially eliminating that berm. And this is, from a water quality standpoint, we're still achieving the required water quality targets by the use of our vegetated swale and our sediment forebay. This has been sized in accordance with the DEP guidance documents, and so the basin itself can really function more as a basin rather than that additional water quality renovation that we were looking to achieve previously. And this just shows, I should have went to this slide, I forgot this was in here, Jim, but this is the previously approved basin layout. You can see sediment forebay meandering around a berm, and then this was the wet spot. And then you can see our proposed changes, and essentially it's very minor in terms of modifying the grades, but it does achieve the desired goals. And we have actually been going back and forth with Scott as part of this project closeout to do our as-builts to verify that the grading is achieving what our design intent was. So, from a utility standpoint, this is a previously approved utility plan. Very minor changes to the location of some of the underground utilities. We changed the septic system was revised from a galley system to a stone trench system. It does not have any impacts to the wetlands. And then just you can see very minor modifications to the locations of the utilities coming through here in the stub locations. And none of those revisions would have any adverse impact to the wetlands. I do have, just because I wanted to show you, the site looks great. I think it's certainly achieved the goal. We wanted to find a place for the buses to park, and they've been able to do that. I wish I had more pictures, but this is what I could grab, and actually I was copying these while I sat in the gallery. But so that essentially summarizes the changes that we're proposing to the commission to consider. We have gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission with these revisions, and they were actually, or excuse me, we went through Planning and Zoning staff. They were able to approve these administratively, but since there was a long discussion regarding the amphibian barrier, we did feel we wanted to come before this commission to discuss this with you and seek your approval.
On the first page of your memorandum, you also say that you're removing a swale that had been proposed. You haven't mentioned that.
Well, that's the berm. That's the meandering through the basin.
No, this is a swale that was proposed as a center island for the bus parking. I don't think you're parking the buses in the detention basin.
Oh, that's true. Excuse me. I
That's
apologize
okay.
for that. At
That's
one point, and actually, I think that was actually one of your referral comments. We had initially shown a swale in the center of this parking spine here. And it was, we had some drainage in there. We were trying to basically intercept some of the stormwaters that came down the hill, collected through here, and then it was routed around. As part of our discussions, we were trying to make sure that we were initially proposed that to satisfy the requirements of the interior landscaping requirements. During the planning and zoning process, we were actually able to achieve those requirements throughout other landscaped islands on the, for the project, so we weren't required to provide that center island. And when we really looked at it, we kind of saw that as more of a potential nuisance and maintenance headache and issue that would have probably just resulted in more of an eyesore, and it wouldn't have achieved its desired intent. So we were eliminating that as part of this as well.
Wasn't it also supposed to be to assimilate some of the drainage though from the parking lot and treat?
Well, it was initially, but again, our primary measures were from a water quality, or excuse me, a water separator here, which collects the drainage from this, and then the rest of this drainage does go into our swale and is discharged into our sediment forebay, which again meets the requirements of the water quality manual.
How come you removed the swale or the burn in the pond?
We wanted to make sure we provided the necessary volume, stormwater volume to.
So the serpentine swale that you had it for a water quality purpose, but you're saying it's no longer needed in order to meet the objective of your water quality volume?
Correct, yes, and again, you were, in the absence of your participating in the original commission discussion, a lot of that was again because we were proposing millings. We wanted to make sure we had that additional renovation, so that's why we initially proposed that berm in the first place.
The question I have is, I don't understand, if you're taking that wet bottom and you're keeping the elevation, basically the surface of the water the same, why would you change your total volume of the pond at all?
Well, we eliminated the wet bottom, so we brought it up a little bit, and
Yeah,
then we
but I
had
mean,
to.
if the pond is full all the time, then you're not getting any additional storage.
Sure. The other consideration for that, and again, it's all slowly coming back to me, but was the outlet control structure. One of the other components of our previously approved plan was actually modifications to that outlet control structure and reconstructing that, the outlet. What we were able to do is actually, we wanted to revise our model to try to keep that outlet control structure so we could avoid that disturbance of putting in a new structure and potentially the outlet that discharges to the wetlands. And we've been able to maintain that existing outlet control structure to eliminate some of that additional disturbance in the basin itself. So by revising our analysis to reflect the existing outlet control structure, it required the minor changes to the grading of the basin.
Okay. Now, what is that basin's there now, correct?
It's a municipal basin. It's covered under a municipal easement. The town of Monroe is required to maintain it. It handles stormwater from the Enterprise Drive.
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about the amphibian barrier.
Yes.
In the original application, were there documented amphibian species observed on the site?
No, there were not.
But it was just a recommendation to.
It was in, there has been, not part of this application, but of other applications, there have been vernal pools established in close proximity, so we
Right.
were within that terrestrial habitat, and since we were proposing the wet bottom, we wanted to make sure we were preventing it from being a decoy.
The next question was gonna be if they found these cryptic pools, you know, part of a swamp that will flood and you will get species breeding in some of these, but they're not technically vernal pools, that you could have those spotted throughout. There's a significant amount of wetlands here, so it's possible, but I understand. And would rather see a wet basin anyway. I mean, I'm sorry, a dry basin. And which leads me to, Were there, or I should say, was there a planting plan developed for the wet basin that we should be looking at in terms of modifying for the dry environment?
Yes, and we did, we did make those very minor, or proposed to make those very minor tweaks. This isn't zooming in for some reason. Well, essentially what it was is we, previously we had a number of plants in and around that center berm, and we basically shifted them out to the edges of the perimeter of the basin itself. So you can see we maintained the same quantity and type of basins that were, or type of plantings that were previously approved, and we just provided them around the perimeter of the basin rather than within the center.
So what's on the bottom of the basin?
New England wet mix,
Oh, okay.
seed mixture.
What's on the slopes right now out there?
It was probably seeded with that at one point, but it's
Yeah.
kind of just, yeah.
But it's stable, right?
Yes, yep. But again, as part of this, there was some disturbance, and now it's being reestablished. And essentially, this is the last, surpassing this commission, getting this commission's approval will be the last item to let this property get its certificate of occupancy and continue to transport our children.
Well, Evan,
Yeah, they didn't see that picture of the buses there.
No, we didn't see that.
I wanted to show that it looked nice and green. And actually,
That was a smart move.
and they actually showed, they had their sign too. I encourage you guys to drive through there because it's a really, really cool sign. It's like, looks like a bus. It's awesome. Sorry.
it is actually.
On the second page of your
Keep going.
memorandum,
Yeah.
under the grading and drainage plan, the proposed four-bay spillway has been modified to include riprap stabilization with a 6 mil plastic sheeting. Is that normal? I don't remember talking about plastic sheeting.
It's something that we put beneath the riprap just to help stabilize it. So it's not, it's somewhat of a standard detail to make sure that it's protected. We have been incorporating it into a lot of our
Okay, I
details.
just didn't know about it, that's like plastic.
It's under, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's just more of a construction methodology to make sure that everything stays stable,
Okay.
prevents against erosion.
Alrighty.
Instead of like the geotextile fabric?
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah.
Actually.
We actually did both.
Talk-
We
yeah, I
included
was
both
gonna
the
say,
6 mil
so
plastic
we're
and the
having
fabric.
Hmm.
The plastic creates the impervious, prevents against water seepage through there to create potential erosion. And the fabric provides stability and strength.
Right.
Okay. I have a question just running out of my mind.
The only last thing I would have is erosion control details while you're working in this area. It's an active stormwater basin from the street and from the site, phasing and stuff on how that would get done.
We did provide, obviously, as part of our, we had our soil sediment control plan, and it was done during dry conditions to prevent against that, and it was adequately protected.
In other words, I guess during construction, and is there a duration of time that you anticipate this taking? A couple of weeks, a month?
It would be a couple days, and it's
Couple days.
transpired.
I'm just thinking of ways of handling Enterprise Drive. If there was a storm event and you were in the process of mucking around in the basin, of handling that water.
Yeah, I
Or
mean-
the first step, creating a stone berm as a forebay on that end temporarily.
There is one. I'm sorry, and if I didn't, it is shown on the plan, but I'm sorry if I didn't clearly articulate that, but yes, you can see here, there is a stone berm and there is a forebay on this end, so that the discharge from the town does go in there. I will say that, and maybe we can write a letter to Public Works, that we would probably recommend some additional maintenance of some of the stormwater facilities out in the business park, because there does seem to be some sedimentation buildup.
But there wasn't a formal, like, construction sequence, or am I missing it?
Well, it was approved as part of the original approval. It wasn't something that we were proposing to modify, so it wasn't included in this submission materials because we didn't.
But you're modifying now an existing one in a different manner, so how is that sequencing? You're saying the sequencing is gonna be the same?
What we did to protect it is make sure we had those.
Is this
so-
done?
Yes,
So it's already in this,
yes,
Wait, it's in this new situation?
yes, it is. And it was done in over a period of a couple days.
Oh, I thought this is coming in to be proposed to change.
It is.
It's one of those forgiveness things.
So why am I asking questions?
It's spirited discussion.
Okay,
But, no,
so-
I'm sorry if I didn't clear the discussion in that direction, but, this was something that was done over a period of a couple days during a dry period. And our soil erosion control plan was primarily focused on protecting from the outlet, so we maintained all those measures in place. And this was able to be completed in a very,
Okay.
now,
Brief timeframe.
if we wanted to see that berm maintained or installed in this case, what would it do to your volume?
we would have to remove the existing outlet control structure to reconstruct it, and it would create additional disturbance.
Do you have any, I don't know what the test pits were, if you did test pits to find where groundwater was under this, I'm sure you did some, but instead of building a swale and elevate it, or not a swale, but kind of a dike in there, almost creating a serpentine channel so that the first flush, if you will, goes around, and it's depressed, if in that area.
And that's what we did that's what we did when we established the wet bottom. It was based on test pits and groundwater elevations.
Mhm.
So we basically excavated down to where we saw those redoxymorphic features
Yeah,
so that it would be.
to keep it wet.
Right. But under its current elevation of elevation 408 for the base and bottom, it's not wet. So rather than.
So if you go below that, you're gonna get into trouble.
We're probably within, 6 to 12 inches in that window. We have very little room to go deeper.
Excuse me if I missed it, but when was the last test pit done?
I think it was after, the last test pit to establish the groundwater elevation was done
In the
in.
basin, I mean, in the basin.
The last test pit done in the basin to determine the groundwater elevation was done in April of 16, or March or April of 16, because it was during the approval process. And this came through the approval process in early spring, late winter of 2016. We did permeability tests, percolation tests to determine that it would fully drain, I want to say August or July. So we established groundwater during seasonally high groundwater periods, and then we checked the permeability during the low groundwater period.
Okay. Does that address C3?
Oh yeah, we can talk about Scott's comments.
No, I'm still looking for additional information. I mean, it could be in the form of verification of that, but I was a little bit confused because the as-built that I got showed that the bottom of the basin was a different elevation than they were saying in their proposal. Hearing that there was some issues with the survey, they're trying to rectify that. But I wanted to have a little bit better comfort level on where the redoxymorphic features are, the elevation, and where the groundwater is. We've been having problems with several basins in town, not just the ones here, but there's been a couple. I'm telling you, storm drainage design is a problem for us in inspection. Everybody's putting these structures in, and they're not doing a thorough job, in my opinion, of testing and sampling before they go in. The health department requires all kinds of tests and samples for the septic systems because there's this notion that you know, that's more important for the environment, people would get sick kind of thing. The drainage facilities are kind of an afterthought. And I'm trying to get the applicants to do more work up front, and they are. I mean, they're starting to ask that. I'm trying to get that done when they go out to do the septic testing, to do more testing for storm drainage. Because I know it's coming, and they need to know that before they start designing these things. We've got a bunch of basins that turned out to be wet on the bottom, and it's a problem. You gotta go back and you have to get them to tweak it and the whole thing. So I feel pretty comfortable with this, but I just wanted them to verify, hearing that they have the information.
Yeah, our surveyors were out there again actually today to verify the elevations, and they had met the 408 contour at the base.
Right, and you just indicated that you have the test pit information.
And I thought we had submitted that as part of this.
I couldn't find any test pit information.
Okay, I know it was in our analysis, but we can certainly provide that.
All right.
Following up on Jeff's concept, so if this project is basically done, then the drainage is already going into the basin from this whole bus yard,
Yes.
correct? So how are you going to plan it to do the work, since you're doing so much change to it? Or is the change already done?
Change is already done.
So we're approving this after the fact?
Yes.
This is John Kimball. Let me just step in here for a second. I'm at 1428 Monroe Turnpike. The existing basin is at 40, at the outlet was at 408. So the excavation that we didn't excavate past the approved limits of your approved plan. We excavated, we just didn't over excavate to your approved plan, and we didn't install the berm. So we didn't do anything beyond the limits of what was approved already. We just haven't, if you said, absolutely no way, you have to do exactly what we approved, we would go back into the same basin that we already worked in. We would take the outlet control structure and rip it out and modify it, which we didn't have to modify. We repaired it, but we didn't have to modify it because they remodeled it. But we would just not dig we would dig the additional hole that's towards the outlet control structure, so we would go down another foot, and then we would build the berm in the basin. So we haven't dug past what you've approved. You know, that's all I'm trying to say is, we've done work in the basin, and we stabilize it at this point, and if you said, we don't agree with what your direction is, we will go back into the basin and we will dig another foot in that area and install that and take that material and basically build that berm and then put the wetland, whatever was on the original plan in.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that, yes, we've been in there, yes, we've done work, we got lucky, we did it, and we had the, the other benefit of this basin is that there were some major storms, and other than pushing the silt out of the town's pipe system on the existing forebay and ending up with a 12-foot slug of sand in the forebay, which we pulled out, and that was in the lower forebay that was pre-existing from the town. The forebays haven't even gotten to the point where they've filled up at all. So the basin is essentially completely dry and has been dry for the last 15 years or 14 years that it's been operating. So, and the low elevation of the basin has always been at 408. So we have a pretty good assurance that 408 will maintain as a dry, because it's been dry, it'll maintain as a dry basin.
And this basin has been installed since 2005, I believe, so it's got some history to it.
Thank you for clarifying.
On the berm, right? The berm was made up of soil, right?
Correct.
So it's not as permeable as stone. And if that berm was instead stone, is that taking up your volume, or is that still permeable enough to work? So it's creating a berm, but yet it's.
This would almost be a question more for the town engineer who has to review the calculations, because I think there's probably
Yeah,
some.
I would consider that taking up, I wouldn't consider that volume, because over a short period of time, it's gonna get contaminated with plants and
Sort of.
growth, and it's not gonna be voids in the stone as much. I think you're really playing with numbers then.
Yeah,
You know.
I would agree.
Is there some sort of a barrier you could put in, you can think of? That would be a.
Silt fence? You mean in terms of the amphibian barrier?
No, no, no.
Oh,
as
in the
far as
center?
Creating a berm, without taking up volume. I was trying to think of a plastic, board or something that would create a diversion, wouldn't look too pretty, but.
So as an engineer, my question would be, it's why?
To create a longer treatment,
On the treatment drain. Mhm.
A meandering path
We
through the
don't
basin.
want the water coming in and going right out. Your inlet and outlet are right there together. So by having, affording some length,
Mhm.
Sure.
John Kimball again for the record, 1428 Monroe Turnpike, just, really, Scott's right, some of the hydrology in a lot of things doesn't work correctly, but this one works. I've been out there in the worst of storms, and, this is gravelly, the whole area is a gravelly area, and the water basically infiltrates right into the ground in this basin. This one does not hold water. It's not like the basin at Axel Plastics or some of the other basins around town where, we have issues. So what's happening is, if the water hasn't even made it over the either riprap berm on either basin. So, and that's in crazy storm events, where the highest reported storm events that I've seen over the last 10 years, the basin gets water in it, but only the water that's directly falling in it, so it's clean water that's going somewhere.
Yeah.
And I understand what you're
yeah, and I
getting
think,
at.
with Scott's question about having that test pit data would probably help answer some of the questions that we have.
Sure, and again, I was fairly confident that we had submitted that and we had reviewed that with Scott, and if I'm mistaken, then I apologize for that, but we can certainly provide that, because we're certainly comfortable and confident that there's no concern about this thing holding water.
Anything else from the commission? Anything else from the applicant?
Not at this time, no. Just we respectfully request approval, modification.
Thank you very much. We will close the regular hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, do we need to do,
No, it's a amendment.
I'll figure that out.
It's good for checking that.
I'll figure it out before the end of the meeting when I'm not the chairman anymore. All right, moving right along when we're ready. Onto our enforcement section, IWV 2017-07, 127 Main Street. Pelor tree cutting past the limit of disturbance as approved in wetlands application 0415 Pondview and 0404S Pondview.
Now, if you recall, you had this at the last meeting, and the request is that we notify Jay Keeler, the owner, to come to this meeting, and you also wanted to get a chance to go out and have a look for yourselves and check it out as well.
So,
You look different.
again, for the record, Kevin Soley, unfortunately, Jay had a conflict and wasn't able to be here again this evening. He would be able to come to the next meeting. But one of the things that I was trying to get some feedback from the commission last time is what would, is the commission gonna be looking for a remediation plan to be submitted to address the trees that were cut? If that's the case, we're happy to prepare that and submit that for the commission's consideration. But if you would like to discuss directly with Jay, he's available. He assured me he would be at the next meeting on, I believe, the 23rd. No, 28th, no,
This was the informal
27th,
hearing
27th.
part of this
This is the
application.
informal
This,
hearing part.
right, that's why he was coming in, is to explain it so you could determine what you wanted, what
Yes.
type of submission you wanted.
So without him here,
So,
did anybody look at it?
I did.
I look at it quite a bit, just not formally. I drive by it quite often. There seems to be a lot of trees missing,
Yeah, I agree. I
a
agree.
lot of
You
trees
can see-
missing.
Can see some of them there. You can't see terribly much though at this point because the undergrowth has grown up so high that you can't see the stumps and the trunks lying on the ground any longer.
It just appears that they cut down a lot of the trees that were acting as that kind of buffer there. And I don't, again, I've only seen it from my car, from the drive-through at Dunkin' Donuts, but where are those trees laying?
Right where they are. That's it.
Are
They
they-
just cut them and left them,
Are
from
they-
what I could
Are
see.
they laying in the wetlands, in the
Mm,
upland, or are they laying in the wetlands? Where
Can
are
you
they?
tell us, Kevin, do you know if they were felled into the wetlands? Or if
I
they
do
were
not
just
believe
felled-
they were fell into the wetlands. I believe they're still in the upland. Yeah, I mean, they were basically kind of right at the, as you can see here, they were kind of right along this stone wall. There were some in here. So it was well within the regulated area, but it was not in the wetland area.
Mhm.
We haven't field located those. As I testified at the last hearing, we are doing inspections as part, of soil water sediment control inspections as part of the stormwater general permit from DEP, and I can testify that there's no evidence of erosion in that location, there's no evidence of any sediment disposition into the wetlands. Even with the trees that were cut, they weren't grubbed or anything like that, but they were cut down. So, if the commission feels that they like a remediation plan, I can certainly relay that to Mr. Keeler, the property owner, and we can work on that for you.
Well, do we need to hear from Mr. Keeler, or do we?
I think
we're
we're
just
gonna
letting
want
it
some
rest?
sort of
I think
Yeah,
a
I
plan
think
with,
it'd be a restoration plan.
with plants and something
I agree.
suggested.
Because one of the major things that those trees were doing were providing shade, and now there's none. So I think that would
I
be
think
something.
at some
that
point, we're
would-
gonna be looking to have something put back where those trees were. I just don't know, do we need to hear from Mr. Keeler directly
I don't
before
know
we
if
do
we
that,
do.
or do we direct?
We're still
or do
gonna
we-
talk
I think
to him, but then-
at a minimum,
Of
we're
course.
gonna want
Still
something,
gonna-
so you might as well start working on it.
Start working on something. Yeah,
Yeah.
start working on it.
Or else start pushing off another month,
It's just
and then
gonna
we'll
be
be looking at it next
delayed.
year.
Okay, so you want him to make a remediation submission,
Mhm.
and what's the deadline for that?
30 days.
You should still make him come to the next meeting.
Well, that's,
You didn't, not off the record, but
You're supposed to say that before you say it. Is 30 days
Actually, it
realistic?
wouldn't be a bad idea to talk to
To
him
come up with a
about that.
restoration plan?
Mhm.
yeah, I
So-
think,
so are we still gonna have?
I think we could certainly, we could certainly look at the commission's calendar and submission deadlines and things like that. So this would be a remediation application.
We call it a submission,
Submission.
remediation, submission of a remediation plan.
Okay. So there's an application.
There's a
form.
form.
There's a form and a fee for that, but it's not an application for development, and
Right.
it doesn't follow.
To look at what the deadlines are in terms of your commission, your business, and the timing associated with, because 30 days to make a submission, I think, is certainly reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you speak to him and he doesn't want to do it, then have him come at the next meeting. If he's decided he's not going to do it, then have him come talk to us at the next meeting. If
Well, again,
he
it's in
feels
your,
like he's gonna make an attempt, then we might as well see you in 30 days.
I spoke to him today, and I said, we discussed it, and I said, they're gonna want a remediation plan, we're gonna have to provide some tree plantings, et cetera, and he said he understands that, so.
So you're telling me the deadline is 30 days? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Should we say for the, not next meeting, but the meeting after? Because
Right,
it's
for
gonna
the
come before us, correct? Or no?
It's not
Yeah.
gonna be
Oh,
the
yeah.
next
Oh, yeah.
meeting, that's
No,
not.
no, not the next
That's
meeting,
2
but
weeks,
the weekend.
4 weeks.
The
I think-
meeting, so that's like a month, that's
It
4
would actually be
Yeah.
3 meetings from now. If you gave us
Yes.
30 days to work on the
Hold on
plan,
one
you'd hear it
second.
at your second meeting
It would
in.
be October 25th,
Okay,
Right.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
okay.
right.
That sounds
which
like
means
it's
the
doable.
submission deadline date for that would be the 18th.
Of October.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's what I'll put in the confirmation letter
Okay.
for that.
Yeah, we'll be sending out a letter.
I'm sure he'll give it to me October 12th.
I'll CC you on it.
He's not gonna have you do it?
Huh?
He's not gonna have you do it?
Oh, no, I'm sure he will.
Oh.
It's just, at the last meeting, he didn't tell me about coming to this for him until the day of, so. Or ask me.
Join the club.
Yeah, yes. Mr. Shamus,
Okay.
we share,
Okay, moving on, thank you very much.
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Okay, section B, remediation submissions, ICP 2016-05, 35 Ridgedale Road, Delmedico owner, Pop Engineer.
That's scheduled
That's
for
scheduled
the
for next
next
time.
meeting.
It's
Oh, I'm
tabled.
sorry, that was one of the ones that we moved,
9/20.
yes.
That was, well, it was tabled from the commission and the attorney agreed.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I had it marked on a different
Just,
piece of paper. Leave me alone.
You'll
okay.
get a hang of it eventually.
We're here
He's
to
doing
help.
I think I know what
I
my
know
application
he's
for,
doing-
No.
for chairman's gonna be. All right, IWV 2016-11, 27 Dogwood Road, Silva, disturbance and unapproved structures within a regulated area.
Good night, Commission. It's
Your name and address for the record, please, sir.
27 Dogwood Road, Monroe,
And your name?
Ronaldo Silva.
Thank you, sir.
Scott, would you walk us through this again?
Okay, so this was an application where, originally, there was a, let's call him a builder-developer that bought the, property, was not you, right?
No,
You
No.
bought from them,
Yes,
and, or you represent, are you the property owner, or are you?
probably one, my architect no show up today.
Yeah, okay. So what happened was, he added on to the house in several areas. There were decks that were covered and turned into additions, there were additional decks, there was work on the septic system, work in the yard, work on steps and entranceways, et cetera. There were various additions to the building that turned out to be in violation of the zoning regulations. If you look on the plan, you'll see that there's a very small area where the house, that isn't in the setback lines, and it renders the existing house non-conforming. So any addition to it is a non-conforming and has to go to ZBA. They went to ZBA, I guess you went to ZBA twice, and there was a denial, and then there was an approval of some of the work, but not all of it. So this plan calls for removal of a number of items, and it calls for legalizing the other items. One of the things that I've questioned is, what exactly does that mean, legalizing? Does that mean ZBA has already granted it, and they need a building permit? Maybe you can elaborate on that when you get going. But basically, it's before your commission because it all is within the upland review area to a wetland that's off of the property. So you would need to approve both the removal processes and the proposed, I guess, legalization of the other items on the house that have been completed, and I guess there's a couple more things that just need to be wrapped up and completed as well. So, does that help?
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Maybe I'm missing it, but where is the right-of-way, the town right-of-way that is being discussed?
The right-of-way is that shaded area that comes in toward the D in Dogwood. If you look down, there's a dashed line that goes down toward the lower left-hand corner of the
Looking
drawing.
at the wrong one?
Look on their submitted drawing. Starting in the bottom lower left-hand corner, there's a double dashed line that runs up through the title to the drawing. That's the right-of-way. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Isn't the house kind of in the right-of-way too?
Well, the
No, it's
right-of-way ends at where the house is,
not. I see.
where their property is. Well, I shouldn't say it ends there. It does take an angle, it follows the same angle as their southerly property line. You can see it runs along the south property line and continues. The right-of-way is in the wetlands.
Okay. So,
I mean, it was an existing house, it
Right.
was an existing driveway, an existing yard, they just added on to it without the permits.
so it's mostly the structures that are the issue?
Yes,
Do we know which ones are not, which ones are or are not already okayed by zoning?
well, no, I don't have verification on that, that's one of the things I've asked for. But if you read their plan, they show, landings to be legalized, proposed 2-foot-high stone wall, you got proposed silt fence and stake, you got deck staircase to be removed. So there's a portion, there's a deck and a staircase they have to take down. I'm assuming that the stuff they're removing is stuff that the ZBA did not grant variances.
Well, it looks like they're just moving those steps. Oh, no, I'm sorry, the two staircase being moved and then proposed deck and
There's
staircase right
a-
next to it.
Yeah, and there's a large area of the driveway, portion of existing drive to be removed and restored with topsoil and grass and seed. So you can see that they're establishing the original short section of driveway, there's no garage, and they're proposing to take away that pavement and driveway that was in there.
Is for, like, what reason? To gain building coverage or something?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, he could elaborate. This is the first time I'm hearing with their presentation. So my understanding is that, again, there's things with the house and the structure. As far as the yard outside, one of the things that's really lacking on the plan is it shows what appears to be existing original contours and then existing contours. So I don't know if that's fill and they're proposing to take it out, or maybe you can explain to them why you're proposing to take the asphalt out.
As no have the cover enough, need more land,
They need more.
It's coverage.
the coverage,
Coverage.
that's the reason.
In order to keep some of the structures, you have to remove some of the pavement.
We're gonna remove,
Coverage?
What this might be is the lot might be, I haven't really run across this much, but I'm wondering if the lot is so small
yes,
that the amount of impervious coverage doesn't comply
Yeah.
with the zoning regulations.
Yeah, that's what I think, okay.
Now, usually you don't see that as the house is small compared to the lot size.
What's that percentage?
I don't have that information, that's what the
Right at your
applicant,
fingertips, you
the
don't have
applicant's
that?
supposed to have that, but, I mean, I could find out.
Representatives
It's
are-
very disappointing, you, Scott.
To be honest with you, it kind of surprises me because I.
It
did
doesn't
not-
look that much. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't look
I-
like that much, and
No,
I
it doesn't.
also,
Is he just trying to recreate upland?
And it's not like there's wetlands on the property that would,
I don't know.
So does he have to take out some of that asphalt to keep some of the decks? Is that
that's
what?
what I'm thinking.
It's
Is that what you were told, sir?
It's not really asphalt, it's like, it's dirt road, it's dirt road. It's dirt road in there, it's not really asphalt.
So that
It's
driveway is
it's
just
like gravel, you know?
gravel.
It's just gravel.
I don't know.
So you're just going to pull up the gravel and put in topsoil and seed?
Yeah,
Okay, is it because you want more lawn?
they asked to do it,
They asked you to do that?
the zoning.
Can we get a report?
Yeah, I was just
on-
gonna
Can we
say.
get a copy of ZBA's
Sure.
Yeah,
report?
do they-
That might help us a
Do
lot.
they issue a decision or like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, we can kind of go off of?
Pardon us for being confused.
This is sort of confusing.
It is
is.
confusing.
Deck to be legalized.
So when you
Needs to
say
be
deck to be
legalized.
legalized, do you mean by ZBA or by us?
No, it's ZBA,
By ZBA?
Yes.
So they have not approved it yet?
they prove some,
They-
so you went to ZBA once,
what, twice,
you went twice.
yes.
I'm sorry, I just thought that there would be a presentation. that would-
Is, screen porch was legalized, was finished.
The
And then-
swing set
the
you're
screen
removing,
porch
right?
was-
Yeah, the screen side gonna remove, got the coverage,
I don't know why,
I don't know why, but I gotta move.
that doesn't make sense. It's in the middle of the.
So
country.
we can take this up at the next meeting.
Yeah.
We'll get,
Yeah,
I'll talk to
we
the
need to
planner,
table this.
and I'll get a copy of the ZBA letters, so you have a better understanding of what they're
Then
looking for.
they prove the deck, the land, the stairs, one, the deck had to be cut in half, almost.
Yeah, so they
They
required
show
some,
up, they show in the plan in there.
yeah, so they required some of, and I had put in my comments that that needed to be verified, so it was, there's a number of items that I'm looking for anyway, so I can work with them to get a response to those. And I can get the letter from ZBA.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
So what we're gonna do is
Come
we're gonna
back
take
to
it
this.
up at the next meeting, come in and see me about this, and I'll get that information together.
Thank you, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. But according to this foundation, there's filling and building materials.
What's the next meeting?
I think we have,
That would be,
2 weeks from.
The
yeah,
27th, October 27th.
no, September.
September, sorry, jeepers, what month?
2
are
We
weeks.
we?
wish.
Thank you.
All right. You ready to move along here? Continuing with remediation submissions. Is number 12 Maple or number 8 Maple taken off the
Eight.
agenda?
Number 8.
Number 12 is taken off, right? And number 8 we're still dealing with?
8 is
that's
off.
correct.
8 is off, 12 is on.
I had it backwards, my mistake. Okay. So IWV 2014-03-R, 12 Maple Drive, Rizio, remediation submission to address unpermitted fence, clearing of trees within 150 feet of a named water course. Submission review.
Just to kind of lead into this, Donna, you have the file for me? If you recall, this and the property for 12, for 8 Maple, were both brought in, and they're kind of being handled together. The work, what happened was, we got into a discussion about how to address the remediation, and she had some desire to expand the parking lot. They needed more parking, and there was a desire to do some development of the property in an effort to also do remediation. I believe that that's the set of plans that you have. they're in a preliminary state. There's a number of items that need to be addressed on that plan, and the application needs to be a full-blown wetlands application for that. So that's why number 8 was taken off the agenda. And she was using the same set of plans for both properties. So if you look on that plan, you'll see that for 12 Maple, there is a very small area on 12 that is to be remediated. There's no proposed development on 12, so she came to talk to you about that and to present the remediation for 12, and that's why she's here.
So 12 is just that little square in
Yeah.
the top left part, okay.
They're two different lots, and that's the, 12 is it's a light industrial district. It's a pre-existing non-conforming residential use, so there's a house and a garage. You can take it from there.
Hi, Millie Rizzio. I've been here many times.
Welcome back.
I feel like I should be sitting up there. This is the area in question. Okay, where we had put some millings down because we thought it was a good thing to do. And we have to remove the millings now, and we have to put new topsoil down and some loam and replant some grass. The other violations were that some trees, I guess, it said some trees needed to be planted. But however, the area in question is this particular area right here. It's about 5 feet by about 22 feet. So basically, what we're looking at is unpermitted clearing and thinning of trees within 150 feet of a named watercourse. I'm sorry, I don't see where this happened. If you
Yeah,
can
let
tell
me-
me where this happened?
Yeah, let me just show you. My understanding is that, let's zoom out so we get a better, whoops, don't you hate that? All right, let's try it again here. All right, so here is the property right up here. So we're talking about number 12. So you got the house, you got the garage. What he was talking about is right along here, there was a few trees that had been taken out.
There were no trees taken out over there.
All right, well, I'm not real familiar, but right over in here, there was growth, and my understanding was that it extended a little bit onto this property. You know, I could be wrong, but I thought that this area in here.
That area there where you're,
Yeah, see
where
this,
you're looking at right now, which is right here,
yeah,
this had pine trees on it, which originally, when we had done this building and we actually, this was a 5,000 square foot building, a number 8 Maple, when we first purchased it. And we did addition after addition. We did parking lots, gravel, whatever. And the town at that time made us put up 75 pine trees, white pines. This was back in 1980, 79, right around there, okay, when the buildings was first done. Those white pines didn't last too long, okay? Eventually, over time, they either became diseased or they got hit by storms or whatever, and they fell down. There are still some white pines on the property, but no, I mean, there's probably maybe 20 left, you know, of the 75 that we originally planted. Mind you, this is what they asked us to plant, was white pines. Okay, I would have picked something else, but Dan Tuba at the time said he wanted white pines. So I said, okay, fine. So those trees, you know, all, you know, over the period of 35 years, they've either become diseased or fallen down, or pretty much, you know, they created like a sail, you know, because the bottom branches would fall off, created a sail, and then they fell down. But on the side of the garage, actually, there was some plantings in natural plantings, and they're still there, and I have a photograph on my phone. I didn't print up the photograph, but I have one on my phone that I actually took on my way here. There's shrubbery there. There's plenty of greenery there. So, but there were never any trees that we planted there. When we purchased the home, probably in about '85, there was some rose bushes there. They're still there. There's a lilac. That's about it. Rosa Sharon?
I have a question. The existing riprap, right, from there up to the garage,
Uh-huh.
in that shaded area where it's,
Yeah, but we're not talking about that right now.
no,
We're
but I'm
just
trying to get
taking
an
care of
understanding.
12.
Right, I understand, but I'm trying to get an understanding of what is there vegetation or is it lawn all the way from the garage?
It's vegetation.
And is it trees? Is it,
Shrubs,
Shrub.
trees, there's some, like I said, there might be a pine or two left there. A lot of bittersweet.
it's not
A
lawn.
lot of bittersweet.
it's not lawn?
No, no. I mean, there is some grass there, but
Yeah.
not what you would consider to be a lawn.
I understand, yeah.
I mean, it's nothing we planted, it just came up.
Mhm.
This was cited how many years ago for tree or for clearing?
Again, we're not talking about 8.
I know,
Everybody
I'm not talking about
understand?
12.
You know, let me
Mhm.
move this around so we can see what we're talking about.
Because we're talking about such a tiny area.
Yeah, that's why I had her come, because, let's see, we want to go counterclockwise.
My questions,
That's why I had her come, because she's coming in with a whole plan for this property. There's various violations, there's remediation work, there's proposed work. She's gonna be coming in with that. I gotta work with them to get an application, we gotta get it properly processed. However, this front parcel here, as I said, has the house, has the garage. There's a door in the back of the garage, and there was this this shaded area here is Millings. And what was happening was they were accessing the garage from this property, and we pointed out that that doesn't comply with both wetlands, because it's within the 100-foot upland review area, and it doesn't comply with some of the zoning requirements. So they are going to be addressing that. You can kind of get a sneak peek here and see they're proposing this as their parking lot, which more closely matches the originally approved parking lot. And they're proposing to take this Millings out. Literally, what she's here tonight for is this little tiny rectangle here. It's about
5 by 22.
5 by 22. That is the only work on this property that she's proposing. She's
Okay.
proposing to take the Millings out.
We're not worried about any possible tree removals.
No, and I didn't have that in my comments. I don't know where you got that from.
Okay, so
Yeah, it says
let's move
unpermitted
on.
clearing.
Yeah,
It
it
does say
seems like
that.
it should be.
Right.
pretty
All
simple.
over it. Good job.
You guys want to see the side? Question the side?
I'm good.
Okay,
We're good.
We believe it.
I'd be happy to show
Have
it
us
to
a
you.
good night.
All right, so,
She wants to remove the millings, loom, and seed it
Seed.
with grass.
just
And-
behind the garage.
Just on
Just
grass.
that
And she's still gonna be going from 8 into the back door there?
Okay,
Or-
let's talk about that a second, okay? This garage, we used to have a business on 8 Maple Drive. We don't have that business, and we haven't had it since 2011. In 2012, we actually shut the business down, okay? So we had some things that were left over in our business. We used to have a cabinet shop, we had a showroom. We had some brand-new appliances and the displays and everything that right now, what I have inside this garage is a couple of brand-new appliances, double oven, cooktop, you know, those kinds of things. They're my personal things, okay? I'd like to be able to access them when I need them. However, I can tell you honestly that that back door hasn't been opened in a month and a half. That's the way we access that garage. We use it for personal use.
And there's a door in the front of the garage.
There
as
is a
well,
door
right?
in the front, however, the person who is living in that home does not have access to the garage.
Okay, so, but we don't, so you still want to access from the back, you don't want to access from the front?
I want
What I'm wondering
access
is,
from
can we,
both.
I'm
So
sorry,
you want
say
a
that again?
dirt, so you're gonna have a dirt driveway.
No,
No.
I don't need a driveway at all.
How
I
long,
don't
so
need
you're
a
gonna
driveway.
drive over it once a month kind of thing, or?
Probably not even that. Probably maybe once every 2 months, 3. And you're only talking about a pickup truck. It's not like you got a big truck going back there.
I mean, would you want to have a section of millings to stay there to access?
I mean, if you want to leave them there, it's fine with me, but from what I understand, I need to get rid of those millings.
I think that was a zoning thing, right?
Yeah, the millings we're looking for them to get rid of and also remediate. You know, originally that was, let's call it a green area. So we were kind of suggesting that the millings be removed because that's in anticipation of going to planning and zoning. I know that's going to be one of their issues. We got into this whole thing about the garage and the use and the access, and, you know, she's kind of walking a fine line on that because, you know, is it a residential use or is it a commercial use? Commercial use is not allowed. The lot is either commercial or residential. So she's saying that their leftover appliances, I guess, are residential. She has some storage in her garage as a residential. It's not a
Maybe there's
business.
more.
You're not selling this stuff
No,
as a
no, no,
business.
You
no.
can't access it through the driveway to the other side.
I mean, I would rather not, if I really needed to, but I would rather not because I really don't want to disturb the tenant that's there. I don't want to ask him to move his vehicles. He happens to have a vehicle that
Oh,
he's
okay.
working on. It's a 1956
Don't say too much.
Pontiac.
You wanna know these things?
No, I mean, it just, you know, it's, you know, but anyways, you know, for him to move the vehicles, I believe it's going to be a problem for me to access from the front. And I really don't want to ask him to access from the front. When we built the garage, okay, we submitted the plan with door front and back. We got the permit for the plan front and back. I have a CO for the garage front and back. So I don't see what the issue is. I have my personal belongings in there. I'm not running a business out of it.
I think some of the issue is that the activities are within the regulated area that wasn't permitted, and so that's why we're looking at it, correct? So-
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, repeat what you just said?
These were activities that are regulated that weren't originally permitted. So by putting in the millings within the 100 feet of the stream, the
Mhm.
wetlands,
Hmm.
needed a permit, basically.
Well, I'm gonna remove the
No,
millings.
understood. I'm just saying that's what we're looking at.
I mean, you have to understand
I know.
also that there's not 6 inches of millings there. I mean, grass has grown through them already. There's very little millings.
Okay, well, I mean, my feeling is if she's only going there every couple months, it's not gonna be an issue.
Right, well, that's what
I mean,
I'm, yeah, that's what I'm getting
especially
at,
for
is
this,
driving
I
up to the
just-
back of that through the regulated area, an issue for us.
To me, for stabilization, I would rather see some of these millings stay to provide
It's a
access, so it's not an erosion issue
Yeah.
long
It's
term.
zoning. They can't do that because of zoning, right?
Well, right, but, I mean, I'm just
I
voicing
mean, would you have a
some,
problem with some sort of a paver, pervious paver that's stuck in the ground and?
I don't know if the zoning would allow, like, cause you
any
have a
kind of-
curb, like a
any kind
parking
of
lot.
They're not gonna allow any
You know,
kind of a
I'll tell
driveway?
you, my thinking is that, you know, you have a lot of residential properties, believe it or not, that have garages, that have grass driveways. If they're only driving on that once a month, it's grass. I
Yeah.
mean,
Okay.
what I tell people too is put
Good
in,
fun with you.
they could put in structural grass. Structural grass can be as simple as, stabilization fabric,
She's asking, well, she's.
and then a couple inches of topsoil on top of the stabilization fabric. That's not gonna, that'll perform fine.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I mean, we got parking lots
Okay,
that,
we're
that
spending too much time on
I know.
20 square feet.
This is not a
Yeah,
big deal,
fine.
that area's not a big deal.
Okay.
I think
For what we're-
the bulk of it will be when she comes in with
Right.
12, I keep getting these.
8 Maple.
Eight Maple, that's a different story, and I think that's when
Okay.
you're really gonna focus on that.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Sounds good.
so, we're good?
We're good.
Okay. I'll be back.
Anything else from the commission?
So we'll get a letter to you, out to you on that, and,
Okay.
just before we totally leave that subject is, the deadline for doing that on this would be what?
I'm performing the work?
Yeah,
You plan on doing it right
It's
away?
already been started.
yeah, and my suggestion
30
would.
days?
Yeah, the
30
30
days.
days will be
Yeah,
fine.
it's fine. Because it's already been started, because part of the remediation also was some cleanup on the side, and that's already been done. Yeah, so,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
okay,
Thank you.
See you soon.
thank you.
It's to remove the millions of.
What's next?
Yeah, what she's.
Topsoil and grass. Okay, moving on to other, if we're ready. V 07-13, 29 Lovers Lane, Gavern, rear yard filling, guidance on remediation submission.
How we doing, folks? John Gavin, 29 Lovers. Here asking for an agent approval for a septic pipe to go through a small, excuse me, intermittent water course that is on the rear side of my property. I spoke with Scott about it last week. I've had a few proposed ideas for the septic, and unfortunately, the best place to put it was on the rear part of my lot, and it has to cross the small intermittent water course. And the reason why I was here talking to Scott, or last week talking to Scott about it, is that it periodically is wet, and right now it's very dry. And I would like to go in and at least be able to put the pipe in so that I can keep it stabilized, because come fall, I know it'll start getting wet again. And the last maybe year or so, I've been having to pump the system there. I actually don't live in the house, I rent it to a family. But I have to pump the system every maybe quarter to make sure that it doesn't back up into the house. And I would have liked to have done it a lot sooner, but unfortunately, as you all know, septic systems aren't the least expensive thing to do, and I couldn't do it at the time. Now I'd like to, I can afford to do it, and I don't know what kind of consideration you guys can give me to try to speed the process along because of this intermittent water course that I have. That's really the nutshell of it. Scott knows a lot. He's met me before there, and that's the reason why I'm here.
This was the letter that you received in your packets regarding the.
Is it a pump line, pump?
It would have to be a pump, yeah.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, but there's just nowhere,
I got it, but I'm not.
not that the lot is small, it's a good size, but Rich Jackson hasn't been able to find any really good soil there to be able to put this unit, and the best place was in the rear of the lot. I mean, I'd like to put it right back to where it is now by digging it out. I know it might be a little bit more work for us to do, but I'm not sure his stance on whether or not if there's a better place to put it, that's the reason why they want to put it there.
And we know that's not wetlands?
Well,
No, let me explain a few
Yeah.
things. I need to, a number of years ago, I think Lois is the only one that'll remember, when he bought sorry about that.
That's all right, I
I didn't
might
mean
have
to
been here, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna
Well,
remember.
it was 10 years ago. It was 10 years ago.
I was
Yeah.
here, I was
10
here
years
very
ago. So-
early in my tenure.
He bought the house and was trying to renovate the house, and he crossed this intermittent stream and cleared the woods that were over here. And back then, we didn't have a real clear process for processing, a process for dealing with enforcement and violation issues. He came before the commission, I explained there were pictures, and to make a long story short, what happened was, the request was to, hey, don't go on that side of the intermittent stream anymore. Take the board or a couple boards that they were pushing the mower across out of there, and leave this area over here. It's to regenerate. There was a discussion about, well, the seedlings are already coming back up again, let it go. Apparently, they didn't do that, and this has been maintained.
Scott, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Well, I'm gonna
But-
finish,
All right, go ahead,
before you
go ahead,
talk,
that's fine,
okay?
that's fine.
This area was maintained, and it's not a woods, all right? And so what happened was, in 2013, he came in and asked what would have to happen to do this system in and to cross the intermittent brook. And I have it in writing that we told him that he needs to come to the commission for an application before the commission. Didn't do that. Time went by, he rented it out to somebody, and now the septic system's failing. So I asked the sanitarian, Rich Jackson, is there an alternative? And he was there at the meeting when I asked him that. And I heard that there is an alternative, that it wasn't tested. There's other areas next to the garage over here that could be tested, and that needs to be vetted out. In addition, what I told him was, I can't issue an agent approval because he's crossing an intermittent stream, which is a direct wetland impact, and I don't have the authorization to do an agent approval. I said, the only possibility you have, and I don't think it's a great possibility, is to come before the commission and tell them that's how you want to handle it, because of time is of the essence for him. And maybe the commission can direct me to do that, although I don't think it meets the statutes.
Well, the first thing is, we need a wetland delineation, because there may not just be an intermittent water course, but there could be wetlands associated with it.
That's
Soil
true.
scientists identify.
I had it flagged. I had a A2 survey done, I had it flagged. I
Okay,
don't
well,
have
then
it
we would
because
need to see it.
I wasn't aware that I needed to bring all that.
Well, and again,
with
this
us
is
right
not an
now.
application either.
Right,
The
right.
slopes to this intermittent water course are well-defined. It's relatively steep, and from my recollection,
But
it doesn't.
if you have, I mean, you could have I've seen them many times, you could have wetlands on top of.
You're right. And so, I don't know that, and so, I told him that everything is kind of telling me that this needs to be an application. I hear that he's got this health issue, but I don't know how to respond to that, because again, the statutes don't allow me to do it if it's a direct impact.
The only way I see it is it's gotta be a formal application, and we need to know what the potential impacts are. Is it a significant activity if you're crossing, and how are you crossing? Are you gonna just go tunnel under, or
Trench.
excavate and
Yeah.
trench, and what's the sequence? How's that gonna be phased? How's that gonna be done? And before you even get to that, look at feasible and prudent alternatives, and that would force the investigation of other viable opportunities for a subsurface septic system in the front. or
And
on the
that's
side.
exactly what we discussed when we were at the office, and he, you know, I respect his agenda and his desire, and
I
he wanted to come
wouldn't,
before the
I
commission.
really don't want to have to cross it, trust me. I don't want to have to deal with the process of going through it. And plus the fact that I have to put a pump in, you know, the line's long at that point. So if I could put it in the front of my house, I'd much rather, because it'd probably be cheaper for me in the long run. The only issue I had with what Rich and I had talked about is that the only place for him to have maybe had me test was very close to my neighbor's property, which obviously, if I'm within my setback, I'm within my setback. But the only thing that there's a lot of ledge over there. And that's one thing that I wanted to kind of avoid, having to do any kind of blasting or anything like that, because I'm just not sure where the best place to put it. And obviously the test holes were best in the back, and that's why I kind of left it like that when I did this B100.
So have you done test holes anyplace else but there?
We did them in the front. We did them in the front of my lot. I have a well. I have city water in the street. It was something I was going to connect to, but because it was a rental property, I just didn't do it. Everything was in working order when I left, so I just didn't need to move the well at that point and connect to city. The meter pit's in, but I just didn't go into the street because I have to cross it to get to the tap. So I left it all alone, and that's just kind of, unfortunately, when I saw Scott last week, it's the same. I'm in a different, obviously, position now because of the fact that the thing's failing. When I did all this, it was okay at that point. I had no problems with it. So I left it alone. That's why I didn't investigate doing any of it, because I said to myself, I'm gonna rent the house. It wasn't worth me putting the addition on it, and I left it alone. So going back to the trench, I mean, I'm talking about 2-inch line. So my trench bucket would be minimal, a foot wide. And I just thought that there'd be less disturbance now because it's dry than if it did get water going through it come fall.
And that might be the case, but there's no way we can do it.
It can't be an agent.
Unfortunately, we
Legally, it
cannot,
is.
yeah, legally, we cannot, first of all, we cannot ask our agent to do an agent approval on that.
I didn't know either, and
the
that's why
only
Scott
way-
made the
The only way
suggestion.
for us to address this is if you make an application, because there's a clear direct impact to the
The water course.
intermittent, yeah. And like Jeff said, if that's the only, I mean, you said that you had your surveys done, you know, that's.
I did.
You're ahead of the game for your application then.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna need to know more information about that.
I had that done, I mean, I don't know if it makes any difference, but I had it, the wetlands flag there, that was 2012. So we're talking 5 years ago. I don't know if it changed at all. I don't know whether or not it's applicable for you to still have that report.
And there you see, you know, part of our conundrum here is because we don't know if it changed either. So now we
Okay.
can't approve you running those pipes through there without knowing all the information that would come with an application.
So Scott, if I do more test holes in the front, like where Rich had said, if you're looking at my house to the left of it, okay? There's wooded area there that is mine, because I know, because when I had the survey done, it was all on my lot.
I mean, over here,
Yeah, right over there.
Okay.
If I have no problem, he has no problem with it going there. You don't have any issue with it going there, as long, obviously, I'm not within the wetlands at all.
well, if you are putting something over here,
Yeah.
I don't know the scale here, but if you're within 100 feet of this intermittent water course, that's also regulated. But if it's in where your lawn is, if it's in the previously disturbed and developed area, then I can do it with an agent approval.
Okay.
And what we're trying to tell you here is, because you have a direct impact, the commission has they're required by statute to make sure that there's no feasible and prudent alternative. So they're gonna they're gonna force you to show them that you don't have other alternatives. So you have to explore that anyway, is what I'm trying to say. So you might as well do it now, and if it turns out to be an alternative, you're kind of forced to go in that direction anyway, because they can't just approve this because you want to do it or they want you to do it. they have to go through the process and demonstrate in their approval letter, they have to state that you demonstrated to them that it's the
It's the
most
only
feasible
way.
and prudent
All right,
alternative.
I don't know, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure why they didn't want to go into where we're talking about on that side. I really don't. I think maybe the only reason why is because they went in the front of my house and determined that the soils weren't good. And that was the end of it, and that's
Yeah.
where,
Well, if your well is there, you can't put the septic system there anyway.
well, I would have moved at that point.
So-
I would have just connected to the city, and that would have been that. I would have abandoned
Unless they didn't
it.
know that. Yeah. But
So-
it would definitely be worth it to check out, to test that area. You might not have any issue at all.
So if I do have an issue, my next step would be obviously to have everything upgraded, my survey,
Yeah, and
the flags and.
unfortunately, you have to come in with an application.
Okay.
Because, and I guess, I figured you'd have to hear it from them.
I'm not trying to do anything that's not normal. The only thing I'm trying to do is just get the pipe in before I know come fall it's gonna be wet.
Yeah,
That's
and
all.
it's
I'm trying to help my own situation and yours to
And
not
the only
impact
way-
it as much as I
That's not gonna-
I have
The only way
to.
that's gonna happen is if you quickly test this area,
Mm-hmm.
you find it's acceptable, and you could come in with an agent. Agent approval, this is gonna take minimum 2 to 3 months.
And that's what I was, not that I was trying to avoid it.
Right.
I was
I don't-
just
You
trying
You were
to,
trying to avoid it, and I
I
don't,
was,
get it.
listen, I don't live there.
Unfortunately,
I
we just
just-
can't allow you to.
We
I know.
understand,
I'm
but
trying to
we're
make
kind of
less of a mess, I guess,
Yeah.
for myself.
It could be, if there's not that much, it's an intermittent water course, there's probably not that much flow in it. I mean, if you have to do the work during flow, there's a way to dam it up and pump it around and keep it clean, so.
All right, I'll contact Rich tomorrow, see his schedule, and I'll, try to see if I can get in over on the side. So,
Good luck.
I appreciate it, guys, thank you very much.
Are we, everybody's okay? Moving on to deliberations.
Yeah, I guess we are.
So items completing for this agenda. That is down there.
You gotta do Timothy Hill first, I think, right? Because that was completed last time.
First, you wanna do that first?
No, it's on the agenda first.
Well, items completed from this agenda.
Oh, from this agenda, you're right. I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah, let's do that. As long as there's no
No,
objection.
hold on a second. That is on the agenda, it's not the public portion of the agenda. That's not, what's happening here is, we had a notice of violation. They came before your commission, you had the discussion, informal discussion with them. What came out of that was, well, we gotta walk the property, and what they said was, well, we also have to do some, work on our end about, trying to address some zoning issues, to try to be in a position to be able to address this a little better. What happened then was, for whatever reason, it kind of fell off the table, at least for you guys. It fell off the agenda as a pending. What happened was they continued with their business with planning and zoning. There was amendments, zone change, things like that, that they were working on, things that the town was working on, and they've made some progress on that. But what happened, as I said, was your end of it kind of fell off the agenda. We realized that recently, and we kind of put it back on the agenda. You, at that last meeting, said, well, where were we? Well, you were at the point where you said, well, we want to go out and look at it. So we had Donna contact the attorney and the property owner. You got the permission. Apparently there was a site walk, and at least some of you got a chance to look at it. And so now where we are is in the deliberation portion, where you now tell me what process you would like it to be taken to resolve this issue, and when you want it done. Now, this is a situation where the applicant is, like many of these, the applicant is looking to fold the remediation into a development plan for there's two properties, for this property and the abutting property. And so we're gonna be in a situation where you need to, in my opinion, you need to advise them that they have a certain deadline to either come in with those plans for development of the properties or come in with a permanent plan for remediation. And that's where we are. I had not anticipated that the applicant would be discussing it with you. It's not a super formal issue, so it's not something that you prohibit them from doing. I mean, you can talk to them about it if you want, but that's where we are.
In your packets tonight, you also got a email from Ross, who couldn't be here tonight, but who did walk the property and sent me a report for all of you for tonight, so that you knew what he saw. And then Jeff, if you were available and did that, you could also provide your input as to your thoughts or
Observations.
observations. Thank you.
Right, I guess my initial question was, could we, since they're here and then there's no one else after them, could we bring this up now, and so they don't have to wait for all the other
My
stuff?
only caution is that this is not a remediation submission. So you don't want to get too deep into what should be done and how it should be done. What we're discussing at this point is, what is the process?
Gotcha.
And when does it happen?
My name is John Rivas, by the way. I represent the owner of both properties, Bruce Mondo. If I was under the impression that we did need to be here, given the notice we got, but even still, if we're just discussing timing, I'm happy to maybe make a suggestion based on my conversations with Jim Swift, who was here earlier. We've engaged his services for a remediation submission /
Before you go ahead, I don't think that we're there, right? We're here as a commission tonight on the agenda. It's maybe to discuss the commissioners that did make it out, what they saw, and decide what we wanted to ask you for as far as.
Well, it's a little helpful in that if he's indicating to you that they've hired an engineer, and, you know, that type of input may help you decide what kind of timing you're gonna establish for this, you know?
Thanks for clarifying that, Scott. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want the timing to be realistic and not,
And
a
maybe
pipe
too.
dream, no pun intended, given some of the issues on this property. But the thing is that Jim Swift, who was here before, we spoke to him. He walked the property, investigated it on September 5th, which was a day before the request for submission, and right on the heels of sort of our filing of maps. What had happened with this property is that 1603 is presently a B2 commercial property, and 1615 it was a residential vacant parcel. And when I was first before the commission, and when these violations first were issued, I think about a year ago, our plan was we needed to get the zone change in place to be able to get a remediation plan on track. And we've got that zone change. I think it was approved in June, maps and everything, Mylars were filed in August. And then right on the heels of that recording, we then hired Jim Swift to walk the property. So, I mean, we're keeping on track best we can, given the various statutory timelines that we have to work with. The application process for the zone change took longer than we expected based on some local outcry, as well as amendments that needed to be made, some issues regarding title to the road that passes between the two properties, back and forth between the town attorney. Bottom line is that it took from like January to June, 6 months, just to get that in place. And that's part of the remediation process, and my hope is that as far as a timeline goes, that we could have a remediation application as well as anything else we need to do to remediate in 90 days. And I would say in the interim, we would like to work with Mr. Schatzline and Mr. Agresta in finding the way that's going to work, and not just something that we feel is what we want. So if there's the ability to sit down before we formally apply, with probably halfway through that 90-day period, we would like to exercise that ability, because quite frankly, once Jim Swift draws plans and gives his opinion as to what can and can't feasibly be done to remediate, we want to know that the town's going to be on board with it as well. And so, that's where we're at right now. And in speaking with Jim Swift in the hallway now, he recommended that, we use that timeline just because it's realistic. I would love to tell you that we could have something submitted in 30 days, but I just don't think, Mr. Shamus was at the site and Mr. Mastroraco as well. It's complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts, especially in light of the fact that we're compounding the wetlands violations along with zoning violations. So we don't want to just take from Peter and give to Paul, meaning that if part of the issue is related to storage, we don't want to just, get it out of the wetlands area, but leave yourself a zoning issue. We'd like to clear these things wholesale, and the zone change was the first part of that. And now the next process is our engagement of Mr. Swift, and hopefully, but again, I want to be able to work with the town to make sure that we're not doing anything, or have their recommendations on what is best for the site, along with our own plans. So that would be my pitch on the timing, without getting into too many site-specific issues.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Is that something I'm going to find out right now?
You sit here long enough, yeah.
Yeah,
I've been
I'm
here.
assuming that you're gonna, since you jumped to that, you can decide that right now, sure. Unless you wanna wait till.
I mean, unless it's, again, I don't really have anything more to add other than that's what I've been explained, given the complexity of the site, is realistic not only for hopefully having a meeting with, town officials, as well as, actually submitting the application. I don't want to be standing here in mid-December saying, well, we reviewed everything, but we're nowhere. I want to have the applications in by that time. That's not to say that the December 13th meeting will yield, a final submission, but we'll at least have applied at that point and be willing to, talk about, on drawn maps about what can and can't work.
In my opinion, being out at the site, there's nothing that's kind of pointing to urgency of having to correct like immediately because there's a contamination issue or there's some other impact, direct impact to the wetlands dealing with the violation. And if it's a matter of working out, knowing that they're trying to get these two pieces to work together, the two lots, so that the storage is moving to another location or whatever. I don't have an issue with the timing, is what I'm saying.
Sounds good to me. I mean, to me, it's more important to do it right than
Right,
do it
right.
fast.
I don't think 90 days is outrageous to ask, to allow for a submission of some kind. You agree?
Okay.
Wonderful.
As long as you don't see anything that needs to be addressed right
There
away.
wasn't like a major erosion control
Mhm.
issue. The site appears stable, and it's been that way for quite a while. 60 days would be great, but,
At this point, you're headed into the
Yeah, you're
winter,
gonna
so
be,
there's
it's
no
gonna be too
rush.
late to
60
do
days.
anything.
Even if they
Right,
got
they
a
take too
approval,
much
they're not-
anyway.
they're not
This
gonna
just has
get
been
the
going on for a while, though, right? I mean, we've
Yeah.
been doing,
Yeah.
we've been
Yeah,
doing
it
this
was,
for quite a while.
yeah.
It's a year, it's a year, admittedly.
Yeah,
So
I
I
mean,
think the violation letters.
you
were
can
dated
understand
early.
our caution, it's already been a while, and now we're a more while.
No, I understand, and that's why I brought up the point about the length of time that it took for the zone change, because we had contemplated a timeline when I had meetings with Scott and Will in the fall of last year, and it was just, we really pushed it literally to like the last statutory day before we got a decision because of neighbor submissions, as well as amendments that needed to be made, as well as another application we had made simultaneously regarding a regulation change that ended up being withdrawn. So there was a few other things that got built into it that pushed us probably back we would have liked to be having this conversation 2 or 3 months ago. That was our hope, because I think we applied in January or so. And we didn't, maybe it was February, I don't recall, but we didn't get approved till June.
And what happened was, what got me to put it back on your agenda, realize that it fell off, was quite frankly, some of that zoning stuff has gotten resolved. And talking with Will, it's like, well, I don't see why they can't be coming in now for the wetland stuff. That's when I realized that, oh gee, we never really resolved it and gave them a deadline date, so that's why I put it on there.
All right, so am I understanding correctly that we're seeing some positive movement on the wetland stuff, and within 90 days, or, you know, a 90-day deadline from now, we expect to see a submission of some kind?
Yes, and also I would like the opportunity, I don't know if this is something I can set up through Donna, that we would like the opportunity to meet once Jim Swift draws plans, because,
Yeah, we'll meet with you anytime you want.
okay, that's fine. And I just, because like I said, I don't want to be barking up the wrong tree and just come in here and say, no, 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 and have to amend it 30 times, and then I'm back here September 2018,
We don't
you
wanna
know,
waste
with
our
a
time
full
here.
beard, and, you know.
Yeah, before he gets too far, have
Yeah.
him do just a preliminary.
We'll have them talk to Scott.
Sketch, and then.
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly, so that's our plan. All
Yeah,
right.
so it'll be that, the letter will go out, and it's gonna say that you're gonna need to submit, development plans that include remediation within 90 days, or at that point, if you don't have the development plan together, you gotta come in with a permanent remediation.
Right, understood, so,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging in there.
So just for clarification, for you, Rebecca, we had jumped to item 11, enforcement, and this was
Yeah.
under
Yeah.
number
No more.
B, administrative review, enforcement
Yeah.
issues, and it was
More.
1603 and
It
1615
was like, what?
Monroe Turnpike, Monroe.
This is what we just did.
Yes,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure that you
Yeah,
understood where they went with that.
I got
All right, so that brings you guys back
That brings us back to deliberations, and we're going to start with items completed from this agenda, which was, the first item on our agenda tonight was 119 Bart Road, I-1205A1.
Move to approve with conditions.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
What do we have for conditions?
The only one that I have two, that if there were any remaining underpinnings from the shed, that they would be removed,
Thank you.
and that, to plant a few more nanny berries if possible.
Doesn't show.
Yes, that's what I've written down, the stuff that Jeff was talking about
Mhm.
over in that area.
In
and
that wetland disturbance area.
whatever was on or underneath that shed area be restored.
Right.
Are we doing 36 Timothy Hill?
Nope,
No.
119 Bart Road. The first on my list here was
All right,
complete.
so hold on a second, let us tool up here. So I need
We're all done if you guys
119
are still.
Bart. Done.
What?
I need to file for 119 Bart.
That's what I was wondering. 119 Bart, that's what we're looking at. Thank you for that clarification.
I apologize.
All right,
Remember, it's always your fault.
bear with us a second here.
No, next barely.
Okay, so, where were you now?
So we're at deliberations from this meeting.
Back, are we here now? We ready?
Completed from this agenda,
Okay,
so we're going
so
back to the original.
we were discussing completed items from this agenda in our deliberation section. We started with 119 Bart Road. Lois had made a motion to approve with conditions, and that was seconded by Commissioner Hayden. And the conditions we spoke about was to restore the area that was underneath the shed that they stated was removed.
If there were any underpinnings
If there
or
were-
any remaining,
Fancy words.
yeah. You like my underpinnings?
Yes, underpinning. I thought that was dresses.
Lois, you structural engineer?
And then the other condition we had was to add the plantings that, what were the names of the plantings that?
Nanny berries.
Nanny berries, over
like
by
that
the
name.
limited disturbance area that we discussed during our presentation.
Okay, and on my comments, let me just go through what I had. That the plan be revised to address that the markers on the plan represent the proposed limits of disturbance. All right, and then, I'm gonna just check on my own, the neighbor's property, and if they got a permit for the shed or where that ended up. A few more plantings, the nannerberry plantings. And then, there was a discussion about requiring or requesting a fence along the LOD and marker line. If you don't feel comfortable with requiring a fence, I could put in something about, it's recommended or desired to have that.
Well, I didn't know if we were allowed to at this point, since it was an amendment to an existing permit. Are we allowed to go beyond the scope of the amendments?
Well, is that beyond the scope of the amendment?
I don't know.
The stuff is being proposed nearby that. I think it's not an easy thing to answer.
I would like to see some kind of a distinct line of demarcation, not just two signs that are easily avoided, ignored.
Okay, are you gonna require it, or are you gonna
Request it.
Could I, what are the signs of the, being posted on?
Signs are going on existing trees. They're going on the typical installation, the one we have a detail for, is a 4x4 post that has a piece of rebar or two spikes in the bottom of it, so that they have to dig a large hole and backfill it, so that you can't pull it right out.
And how high?
I think they're 40-something inches high.
4 feet?
Yeah, they're almost 4 feet. And they have an angled top, and the marker gets nailed right onto the side of it.
It just says regulated area, right?
It says regulated area, there's a picture on there, so it's aesthetically pleasing.
What is it, turtle? I think it's a turtle.
I don't even, it's
I
just
think
like
it's a turtle.
some grasses.
Oh,
and-
okay.
Probably looks like cat.
People seem to like it. We've gotten some compliments on it,
Oh,
so.
good, well, that's nice. That's good.
I was just thinking if there's a couple of those in there, that could almost act as a,
Maybe if we put more than
Quasi-fence.
just two.
well, I
Maybe
think they were doing one.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope, that those go in, people see them and they know. I mean,
There was enough space, between like the first one on the property line and the next one down, that, to still have usable yard area between those two posts.
so, you're saying maybe we'll add two more markers?
Instead of a fence, maybe one more,
Smack in the middle.
some kind of compromise that way. I don't know.
So
How
I'll add,
far were they apart on the plan? Do we know?
I'm sorry?
Was it, how far apart were they in the plan?
Looked like on this, just the angle points of the
Yeah,
wetland
angle
boundary.
points up,
I mean,
but
I
how many
think they're
feet?
usually 50 feet, aren't they?
Yeah, which is too much. I mean, 50 feet.
they are,
I can't even see that far.
let me get my scale at home.
20 feet.
20 scale. So
Looks
we've
like it's at
got,
almost
as
50
far
feet.
as 45 feet, and then as close, than the other half of the property, they're 20 feet apart. 25 feet apart, 20 feet apart, and 45 feet. So they could put one marker in the middle of that larger dimension.
That's where we were
And it
concerned
would
about,
be
right?
typical around 20 feet.
Mhm.
So yeah, why don't we just say every 20 feet?
And the area behind those is not to be maintained.
Yes, we'll put that in the letter.
And left to become woods again. Ah.
Excellent. Okay. You satisfied with that one?
I think so.
Fantastic.
Hold on. And the last thing is I had recommended a $10,000 bond.
$10,000 bond.
That's for the original development.
Okay.
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 We're ready to move on to,
No, you have to Oh,
Yeah.
they need the
Reasons.
motions, and
Oh.
No, you
Oh,
make a
sorry, we have
motion,
to-
you have to vote.
you have to vote.
Now, wait a minute, don't we
Don't we
vote
do
on
the
the,
decision?
on the,
Don't you
we
write the
we
letter
vote on
and
the
then we?
draft? We don't vote draft, we
No,
don't
this is-
vote
Oh,
until
I'm
the
sorry,
draft
yeah,
is done.
I'm sorry, we just,
I finally remembered something.
okay, so we will draft up,
Draft approval.
we will draft up an approval.
Draft up an approval, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next.
All right. Coming up next is 24 Enterprise Drive, IWC 2016-04A1, bus barn facility that we discussed earlier.
Wait a minute. 124 is not the bus barn.
34.
34 is the
I'm
bus
sorry.
barn. Let's get it straight.
Okay.
Yeah, 34, right.
34.
34?
You have 134?
You know what I want.
No,
Okay.
34. Okay, I thought you were talking the
Oh,
IWC number.
Yeah.
34, I missed that one.
No, 34 is what we're doing next.
Yes.
36.
Enterprise Drive.
And 24.
Okay, move to approve with conditions.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Spence, a second by Commissioner Hayden. Conditions,
I don't know.
You know, to start off, do you want me to go through my stuff first? And
Yes.
then you guys add?
Sure.
It's always a
All
good
right,
place to
so
start.
I had that the submitted plans and report need to include life certification. No changes in bonding are needed other than the revisions to reflect this new application and approval in the submitted bond form and bond agreement. Under technical, that the reference to approval of the revised septic system by the health department be provided. They did highlight their changes during the presentation, so I crossed that off. Under drainage, leaving the item that since the proposal calls for leaving the current elevations, bottom of the basin to be approximately 408, but the current as-built drawing, they have a revision issue, or a typo on there that they need to fix. Shows the bottom of the basin at 410. It's not possible to verify the dry conditions. Well, I'm hearing after the fact that the bottom of the basin is really
408.
408, but their survey wasn't correct, so they're gonna correct that and verify. And I'm also asking them to provide the test pit information that apparently they already have, that they didn't give me, that they just assumed from the previous application.
Well,
So,
that should be part of it, right?
yeah, I'm gonna leave that whole
information is gonna be
comment in there,
submitted.
just
Okay.
so I get verification of it. Then the next one, the limits of the recently installed riprap, he put a riprap pad in that was never put in originally from the subdivision outlet pipe, so they added that. That should be put on the plan. And then they have some weirs in the outlet control structure that aren't properly or fully dimensioned on the plan. And it's important because they, when you look at the routing of the basin, if the top of the orifice is not at a certain elevation, he's routing it as a weir, for your sake, Jim. He's routing it as a weir, and a broad-crested weir, and it's just because the elevation stays just below the top of it. So I want to assure that that's in fact what's happening, because if it doesn't stay below the top of it, or above the top of it, excuse me, below the top of it, then it becomes an orifice. And
But-
he has to route it through a different means.
But he's not planning on changing that at all, I thought from his presentation.
Well, they're
If we're gonna make
retrofit,
it- if
they're
he's gonna-
fixing it,
They're
the
fixing it.
structure's broken at the moment. But, so the new drainage calculations use it as
To what it is now.
as opposed to, it's really an orifice, but because the highest elevation in the basin doesn't reach the top of the orifice, he routed it as a weir.
Oh, okay.
Okay, So just a little bit of interesting. It was kind of an interesting drainage calculation to go through because he had the existing drainage basin, which had none of the input data changed, but yet his output discharge, the cue that he got from it changed. So I'm trying to figure out, like, why did it change? And I finally realized that what he did was he used the new NOAA IDF curves to calculate it instead of the other information. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought
You
might-
enjoyed yourself.
I'm intrigued.
So is he using those NOAA curves for all the other projects? I mean,
Yeah, I've asked people to use the NOAA
Okay.
because that's the new, what DOT is using now.
Yeah, I was
So-
gonna say, because he had mentioned that, or Kimball mentioned that they made modifications to that structure.
Yeah, the structure was broken to begin with, and they initially they used some assumed dimensions, like the angle of the V-notch weir and the outlet control structure turned out to be like 5 more degrees more than what they originally were using, you know, a whole bunch of things like that. So to make a long story short, the drainage calculations turned out to be pretty complicated, but I mucked my way through them, and it appears that things are okay.
So we don't have to do anything with it then? His testimony is good enough and it'll work?
Yeah, I'll verify is what I'm saying. I'll
And
have
was
to-
he being genuine in his description of the sequence of events?
Yeah, and you know, what happens with these things, I don't get too freaked out about it, like, when someone has a permit to be working, and they go out and they do something a little different than what the plan shows.
No, I
I
just
mean,
want to
they're-
make sure they didn't just go off and do whatever the hell they wanted and then
Yeah, but
came
it's,
back to you and said, hey, sorry, we're done and
well, there's a
now-
tendency to do that with
That
this
never
applicant, which isn't, you know, we're trying to prevent or discourage. As I said, if someone's working within the boundary of what they got an approval for,
Yeah,
which is
I
what
mean-
they are here, I don't get freaked out about that.
But did they do this activity?
They never built the berm, and they never built
But the basin was in.
the basin was
That
always in.
approved. That
The basin was always
This
in.
has been in for.
The basin was there
Okay,
before
when
they
they,
did their
so when they
development.
did the parking lot, right, and the thing for the school, for the buses, is that when you're saying the first time that they went in and touched this basin, what we saw tonight is what they did? Or did they do the original permitted thing,
No,
and then they recently went in and redid it?
no, what they did was they jumped right to what they're proposing tonight. They did not do the berm and they didn't dig.
One of our-
Otherwise, they'd be filling, because the original proposal showed it being lower. And so,
And so they went in and they jumped right to that, no amphibian barrier, no
That-
dike in the middle, they just flattened
well,
it out?
Rick, that's because the basin was already there, and it didn't have an amphibian barrier to begin with.
Okay, but they knew that they were going in doing things. They knew that a permit was needed because they got a permit, but they just went in and did it and said, oh, well,
But
we
it-
need an
don't you
after the
think
fact permit. That's what.
They
that's
did
what-
it, but it's halfway to what they would have had to do.
So he-
But that's not the point. The point is they came in, they
Yeah,
went
I
out and they did the work. They knew they needed a permit.
Well,
But
this,
isn't there a distinction between doing something that is, or not doing something, which is kind of what we're talking about here? They didn't do the berm, they didn't do it. So
right, they didn't, in
So
other
when they
words,
went in, I think there's a distinction there.
yeah, there is a bit, well, it's not
It could be
that
a negative
simple,
distinction.
because not,
Well,
you know, in one
I mean, it would
way,
be an adverse.
Is it
In
true
one
that
way,
they worked
they-
towards where they were going and they,
see, in one way, they were supposed to dig down further. So they stopped before they got down to that elevation. That's what
Down
Megan's
further.
saying. But in another way, they were supposed to not have the side slopes as steep, and they went further out, so
Yeah.
they went
So
further.
they were
in
planning on
in that
doing
way,
what they got.
did something extra.
Okay.
So, but it's
Is
all
it-
within the limits of what they had originally.
Do we
the
have a
boundary.
standard condition that tells people that they've gotta complete the drainage facilities prior to
Yeah, I put it in the pre,
paving?
I
you know
put
what
it in the
mean?
pre-construction meeting, and
Yeah.
they signed that. But again, here's a situation where there's this big, large basin that's already there.
No, I just,
And the basins were, when they built the subdivision, the basins were sized to handle the developments.
yeah,
So they were just tweaking this basin in this case to include the biofiltration. So I didn't really focus in, usually when someone's building a brand new development, it's like, you don't get your permit to start building your foundation until you build the detention basin. And usually, they build the detention basin, and it's functioning as a sedimentation basin during the construction process. Well, the basin's already there, and it's already functioning as a sedimentation basin, so we didn't do that in this case.
yeah, I'm not
So
worried.
that's why that's a little different.
I guess I would like to see I don't have a problem with the converting it to a dry basin. I don't see why it's any less contamination being paved. I could probably argue that there's more contamination at being paved than being
Yeah, I
millings.
don't quite follow.
That's a
the
P and Z
reasoning on
thing.
that.
But that's a
You know,
P and Z
if
thing.
it's-
I don't have a problem with
We're working against
being
each other,
dry.
yeah.
I don't have a problem taking away the amphibian barrier, but I would like to see the berm in the pond.
All right, well, as far as the-
Somehow, and if he's gotta rebuild that outlet structure to do it, then so be it.
I
Or he
agree,
comes
I
up
like
with
the berm in the
Or
pond.
maybe he excavates a
Move
little
the
bit
water
more
station.
as needed, or.
It's
or-
almost sound like his argument for not doing the berm was because it was gonna cost more to redo that outlet structure. But then he was saying that it would create more of an impact because he was gonna have to do something with that section of outlet pipe to the wetlands. And maybe he does,
I don't
Maybe he
really
doesn't.
see that.
but that's kind of what
Yeah.
it sounded like he
I've
was
heard that
saying,
too.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually you don't have to touch the outlet pipe.
If it's sized right, if the
Well,
elevation's
let me
right, I
back
don't
up.
know.
Sometimes you have to lower it. You might have to lower it.
And that's not
Well,
a
he
big deal.
could bring in a guy to core drill it, or cut it out, or,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's not the, so
Not the end of
basically
the
what
world.
you guys want is, you want them to maintain a berm in the bottom so that the discharge into the basin doesn't directly go into the outlet works.
Right.
You want it,
Yes.
because, if it were on the other side of the basin, you'd feel a little differently.
Yes,
But because it's right there, you want to maintain
it
some
can
type
short
of.
circuit easily.
All right, I'll get them to do that, and they'll have to rerun the drainage calculations and,
Yeah, as
figure
long
out
as
a way
you're,
to do that.
as long as you're satisfied, I mean, I don't want to see it again.
Right, and having the test pits in the bot to know where that groundwater is, where the modeling was, that's key to what we're
It
talking
is,
about.
yeah.
We don't have it, so.
we need, and he's right, because I asked, we've never seen water in the basin. But then again, it wasn't down to the depth that he's talking about. So I just want to get verification of that. All right, so you're okay with, I'll write it up so that it's an approval, it's based on contingency to put the berm in, you don't have to see the berm. I can review the plan to make
Yeah.
sure that they provide some type of barrier, be it a little wall in the middle or a berm itself.
Yeah.
Creates greater separation.
Yeah, and their goal is gonna be, they've gotta come up with the volume that they need to make this thing work. And if they can't come up with the volume by tweaking the outlet structure and changing the grading inside the basin a little bit,
The edges.
the edges can't be any steeper than they are, I don't believe.
Well, he said that all they would need to do is change the outlet structure if they
Yeah,
had to
well-
put the berm in.
Maybe.
I don't know.
They're losing a foot of the whole bottom of the basin, so they have to come up with that volume somewhere.
Well, it's just a little.
Because they're not excavating as much as they were going to, they're leaving
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah.
Either way,
All right, so
He
I'll
also said
write
he
something
couldn't
up.
excavate anymore.
Let's see, so,
6 inches away from the
Right.
right.
Yeah, that was it for my stuff, and then you guys are gonna, Is that
The only
everything?
thing he mentioned in it, I don't think it's part of our approval, but it could be something that you could bring back to DPW, that if the drainage needs to be cleaned out around around the industrial park, that could be, you know, that could be a serious problem with wetlands, because it's so intensive with wetlands, that if the drainage isn't working, we could have a problem.
okay, one thing I have to do is, I've gotta check, because I'm not sure that we've accepted all that stuff.
I know we
So-
accepted the roads,
I don't think so.
I thought we did.
We may have accepted them, but we never got the deeds from or anything, but I'll double check.
Okay, well, maybe not.
If we have the responsibility for maintenance at this point, I'll get.
I'm sure
highway
Chris will be
people.
delighted to hear.
I know
that.
the basin up near Infante is filled with invasives. I mean, it's so bad you can't even get anywhere near it.
It's filled with what?
It's
Invasives.
Oh, invasive?
You can't even see it.
Yeah.
It's so bad. So, all right. So I'll do that, and then, you want them to provide the berm,
Okay, let's keep going. I know.
okay, so we'll draft an approval for that one too. Oh, one last thing is, the, Planning and Zoning Commission, is, in their process of their hearing, and they had some pretty hefty discussions. I don't know if you are the one that monitors P and Z, you just.
No, I haven't been there in months.
Okay, well, they were talking a lot about, oh, you know what, I'm on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Never mind.
we're moving on to that
So the
next.
motion to approve with conditions is seconded, but it's not voted on, even though I know it's just a draft approval.
No, what happens is they make a motion, they second the motion, they then go into discussion. They discuss it, and in discussion, they ask us to draft up an approval. And
Contain-
they want to see the approval before they actually vote.
Okay.
So the deliberations are tabled,
So on voting record, I don't, okay, that's fine.
and
Got it.
that's
We don't need-
standard.
So we don't
Thank
need
you.
another
I don't know
motion
why
when
I'm
we come
having a
around to
brain
it
blip
again?
You what?
about that.
No,
Yes,
what happens is
we'll-
I bring the draft.
And then we go all in favor?
Yes.
Or
Then you-
if there's any modifications,
Okay.
we put them
And
in
that's
We
there.
don't need a
you can-
motion, we just vote next time.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. But what you guys are doing is you're reading that draft, making sure it said everything that you
Yeah.
asked it to say, and then you decide to vote on the
Right.
draft. That's what you've been doing for the last
Okay,
6
I'm
months.
about to leave and leave you guys without a quorum, so.
And we still have a quorum,
Do you?
4.
3?
Don't tell them that.
Oh,
No,
yes,
what do
okay,
you
sorry.
say?
All right,
I
moving right
withdraw
along.
my
Let's go.
statement.
So we are
I
on-
can't count.
IWC 2017-07, 36 Timothy Hill Road, New England Materials, Pepper Street Business Park, section, whatever that says.
I don't even know if I wrote everything.
Before we, what's that? 36 Timothy Hill, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this was closed the last meeting, and we tabled deliberations till this meeting because a lot of commissioners weren't here. So before we do, for the record, did everybody listen to the end of the hearing of 36 Timothy Hill Road from last
Yes.
meeting?
And I listened to June
Yes,
14th.
and July.
So all of you that
Thank
are
you.
going to deliberate have listened and
Wait,
witnessed
Caught up
all
on-
three, I guess there's 3.
All the testimonies. right?
Yeah.
All the
All the
testimonies.
testimonies.
Wait, I didn't listen to anything, so.
Well, you weren't there.
You were here.
Okay, I just wanna make sure I was, because I was told, you told me I wasn't here in June, so
No, it
No.
was,
July
no,
and,
you were fine.
July and August.
Really?
It was me, he wasn't here in June.
Yes.
For the
But I was
plan
listed
open.
in there, I thought I was listed in there, I wasn't here in June.
But we didn't talk about it at
Okay,
that
so
meeting.
this one I'm good.
Yeah, it was tabled a couple
It
of
was
times.
tabled.
Okay.
Okay, and this is the one that I was telling you that the Planning and Zoning
That
Commission
would be good.
discussed the fact that they got into the whole vernal pool and we're starting to discuss that to a pretty good amount. And they made the comment after a while that, hey, you know, we're really getting into the inland wetlands territory. And before we discuss this any further, you know, obviously, Statutes require that we have to get the report from the Wetlands Commission, so they are awaiting that from you.
They're about to
And
get
on a
it.
side note, while deliberation is starting tonight, the decision needs to be made by September 27th, which is the next meeting.
So if we don't, in other words, if we didn't make a decision tonight, we'd have to decide on it by next time.
Correct.
I think we should be able
For
to
the
decide.
statutory requirement.
Right,
Okay.
got it. Okay, we're going to start with the re-subdivision or
So,
the application for the roadway? Because they're two separate parts of our decision. I'm thinking the
Say that
roadway.
again?
So,
We have two parts of our decision.
Your-
One
your
is the
question.
roadway,
And
and
the other is-
the other one is the subdivision.
It is the
This
subdivision,
referral
the
comments.
referral, correct.
Okay.
so will we start
think
with
we start with-
referral comments?
I don't know. I think, do we start with the roadway? Does it matter?
It does matter a little bit, and the reason I'm gonna explain is that in a situation, there are some times when you might have a subdivision, and your referral process, the subdivision portion of it, that's the part where you guys exercise a lot of influence on the subdivision in terms of, are the lots appropriately shaped and sized so that they minimize impacts to wetlands? And if they're not, and you ask an applicant, well, you know, can you change that? We don't like this, blah, blah, blah. You might be in a situation where you might have, and they don't do it, you might be in a situation where you would have a negative referral. And as a result, that negative referral may also affect some of the regulated activity that you'd be approving with the roadway.
Okay.
So they go hand in hand, but you also have to be careful not to use one against the other, too,
Mhm.
if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
So I think they really should get discussed simultaneously as they were presented. You know, you could kind of do it all at the same time, and I think, but
Okay.
I don't,
Where the heck do we start? Do you want to run through your comments and see if that leads us
yeah,
anywhere?
there was, in this case, there were, I have to say, you weren't here, there was a lot of discussion that was above and beyond my comments, but I can start with my comments. Did I have comments for the subdivision referral? I showed you.
Yeah, you
Yes,
did.
at
They
the
were all
end.
in the same
I
comment
put it at
sheet.
the end, right. All right, so, the bonding, the bonding was revised, and the bond recommendation was for $115,000. I don't recall them having any issue with that. So that's the first thing. And then I had explained this application gets very complicated because of the previous approvals. And what makes it a nightmare, quite frankly, is the state statutes which allow, they did this, but they allow developers to start the construction before they actually have the other requirements met and before they file their Mylar on the land records, which to me just is crazy, but that is the law. So what they did in this case was they got an approval, then they posted a site stabilization and restoration bond in lieu of the performance bond to build the roadway. They started the work, cleared woods, cleared areas that they decided after the fact that they didn't need to clear, and then changed the plan, moved the road to the south of where it is. From an engineering perspective, the road's better in terms of the sight line and the profile. it requires a whole lot more excavation, so you have to decide, is that better as far as wetlands goes? It clearly moves the limits of disturbance in some areas closer to the regulated, and closer to the wetlands and the vernal pools. In other areas, it moves it a little further away. So that certainly changes as well. There's considerable disturbance on the property. Now there's ATV disturbance. There's disturbances in their crossings that need to be repaired and fixed. It got very confusing with the comparison maps that they did of what was previously done and what they're proposing and what they're, it just.
So, right with that, could I say something? With those comparison maps? When I was looking at it on the video, there was no key or legend, and he wasn't pointing to, he called out some of the colors. And there's, from what I've seen, I don't recall, maybe there is, but it wasn't presented at any of the meetings that I've reviewed, a restoration plan for the disturbed areas of the wetlands that have been denuded and graded, grubbed,
Yeah.
and there's no plan for it today for how that's gonna be restored. So in my estimation, there's direct wetland impacts on this project that have not been accounted for.
She's pulling up the plan, and it's really, it was, I recall.
I saw more plantings or whatever that they were gonna do, but that's not in the area that was disturbed.
I tried to go through it, and for the most part, I discovered that there was a large area that had been, I think the majority of areas that were disturbed, that didn't have to be disturbed, ended up being beyond the 100-foot upward review area. It's kind of like, I kept, like my observation when I walked out there and looking at the plan, I kept getting confused because it's way bigger than I thought.
Yep.
So I was having that problem.
How about a 5-minute?
The only thing I
break,
could
because
suggest
we're
is
just
we
gonna-
take a look at the plan and
Well, I mean, I was out there and I know,
Okay.
what I saw, where I saw it. I
Yep.
had pictures that, I think I actually emailed them in or something, but a while, back in June or something. And I haven't seen a planting plan that restores those. And I know at the June meeting, I had brought that up as a restoration plan for the wetlands that were impacted, because there are direct wetland impacts, because he kept saying there's no direct wetland impacts. So the way I look at it is those are still there. They may have been,
I thought it was an exhibit. Are you at the end?
Huh?
Are you at the end of the presentation?
Which exhibit are you talking about, Scott?
There was not an exhibit, a figure.
The one with the 3 different colors?
Yes.
I had it, but I got rid of so much paperwork, and I don't know if I kept it. I know what you're saying, Scott, and I know what you're saying, Jeff, and you're absolutely right. He actually said that they would address it immediately, and we never even saw a plan, nevertheless, addressing it. So I'm very disappointed about that. And we asked in subsequent meetings for it too, and it still hasn't appeared. I don't know what we can do about that. But
Yeah, you gotta click on it so you can see it. Just click on each one.
There it is.
Okay, that's it right
that's
there.
it, yep.
All right, so, you're right, there's no legend. So, let me see if I can figure this out.
There was a legend somewhere. You know what, if you take the old plans,
Well, let's look, you got the road here. And,
There's no way that green line is existing limits of disturbance.
Right.
There's no way, because that's right up to the edge of the proposed modified road, is that correct?
Yes.
See that, by that culvert there?
Yeah.
The first one.
Mhm.
That orange line more, or better reflects what's out in the field.
well, like, the blue, light blue line is what was approved originally. Okay?
Right.
So the road was over here, this is, the light blue was approved originally. The brown, let's call it brown or tan line, is what is their proposal now. You could, right, so because I see the line comes here and then it comes down.
That's not what they're proposing, that's what they've already done.
Well,
It
it's,
says
let's
on the bottom, does it say current limit of disturbance on the bottom? What line is that pointing to?
What
Green or
they've-
the tan?
Oh, yeah, there you go. It says current limit.
The orange over there.
yeah, unfortunately, you can't, can you blow this, can you blow up,
If you make it a slideshow, it gets a little bigger, doesn't it?
yeah, how do you blow it up?
See slideshow.
Oh, yeah, right down there. So
On the
see the
bottom.
scale there?
The scale.
Right there.
Currently proposed.
So the green is the current limit and the orange is the proposed limit.
Yes,
Current limit of disturbance, current proposed limit.
yes.
Okay.
And the,
Oh, okay, so the green is what they disturbed. And the
No.
tan
The green
is
is as
no.
it sits right now. That's
The
what
green
that is
is-
saying.
the
That's not-
current limit of disturbance.
Yeah,
Is it-
I don't agree with that.
No, I don't either.
That whole wetland corridor to the brown line is cleared.
Where?
Right.
Right there.
Where the brown line is,
That whole
that's all
thing is
clear.
cleared,
Yep.
and then the other wetland corridor,
Mhm.
down here, the second wetland, is, yep, that one, that's all cleared right up and through there, as well as everything, you know, the whole swath.
Right.
Well,
Mhm.
this, they're telling you this is, the green area from here to there is disturbed.
Yeah, but the green line up at the upper
This
crossing
one,
is completely wrong, because that's not where it's disturbed up to, it's disturbed up to the brown.
Let's put it this way, whatever was permitted, and now they're saying that they want to do something different, well, they've already have direct impacts on the wetlands. Regardless of what was given, they want to change it, and they're still saying, hey, yeah, but there's no direct wetland impacts. Well, yeah, there is direct wetland impacts, regardless of whether, you know, if they were allowed to clear all that up to, you know, those limits, or if they were doing something else within those limits. So what I was saying is, in this, be reestablishing what they disturbed.
okay, so
Can
your
we make that a
concern is
condition?
that,
So we're basically looking at, you know, the disturbed wetlands and the buffers to those wetlands that didn't need to be disturbed because they're changing it now. So they need to go back and restore it. And so, way back, I said, well, we need a restoration plan for that. And then maybe we'll look at that and say, okay, you're restoring it, so it's not a direct wetland impact, it was temporary. Otherwise, it's permanent.
and what would have put this to bed, quite frankly, when I looked at this plan that has the comparison, it's not a survey. And what I asked for in my comments was that provide us with a survey that's from a surveyor that's certified that shows these limits so that you would have something concrete to base your decision on. And they didn't provide that. They provided this comparison plan.
And
So-
and their argument is that it isn't a disturbance because it was within the previously approved scope? Is that?
Well, that's, I mean, part of the disturbance, yes, if it's in the previously approved
previously-
scope, then
yeah.
they didn't consider it. Well, no, it is a disturbance that didn't need to happen then.
Well, I'm not saying that's I'm just saying that's what they were saying. That's what the
Okay,
applicant's
Yeah.
position
That's
was.
what they were saying,
A
yes.
condition that they provide us with a restoration plan for those areas disturbed outside of the,
I can't do
We
that.
can't
I'm not-
do
I'm not
that
the
because
commission.
that's getting information
no,
after
no,
the
after,
fact.
if we
but
approve
we-
it, that would be a requirement in the approval. They have to,
Condition.
a
A
condition.
condition of
But we
approval.
can't-
would be,
Condition,
If
but
we
we can't
approve it.
condition,
You really can't get
that's
new
submission
information.
of evidence after we've done the approval.
So the only thing we
Can't
could do
accept-
is add, if we approve it, add a condition that they do certain things.
That's what I'm
in
saying.
Right.
I'm
Not
saying-
that they said it's a plan.
No, that they have to,
But that puts the onus on us to develop this plan.
Right.
That is not our responsibility.
Right, you're not supposed to do that.
We're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to submit things to us and we say yes or no.
It's one thing to say, add
we
conditions.
can't tell them if we decide to approve it, we can't say, we want additional information in this area?
Not now.
No, it's closed.
The hearing is closed. No more information can be submitted.
And the decision is due statutorily by our next
Right.
meeting. So the
So,
only way to fix that is to present your application and have them reapply.
Is it considered a disturbance though, if it's done in accordance with a permit and,
Yeah, that's
That's a gray
good
area,
comment, like, they have, well,
if I
here's
was
the thing,
representing, that's what
here's
I
the
would-
thing, and this is why I said the statutes allow them to
Yeah.
start as
Mhm.
crazy. Now, let's just think about it for a minute, if somebody starts a development and then doesn't go through with it, they posted a site stabilization and restoration bond.
Mhm.
But the problem is, what does that mean? You know, site stabilization and restoration, they cut down the trees and the wetland plantings, and then they tell you, well, we're not gonna do the subdivision anymore. How does that get restored? You know, it's not an easy thing to restore. I don't think that depth that they went into that depth when they provided that allowance in the statutes. Be that
but
as
this,
it
the
may.
plan that they submitted to us, then saying that here's their limits of disturbance is inaccurate.
Well, you are saying it's inaccurate due to your site inspection. And I'm just cautioning you on,
No, the proposed
You know,
limits
you're-
of disturbance, not
remember,
the
you're
green one.
not, you're not a surveyor. I went out there, it's hard to tell
No.
exactly where you are.
No, you're missing my point. On the plan, they have limits of disturbance. Limits of disturbance in these wetlands, they're not touching anything else. On this plan set, they don't say where their previous one was, in that it was disturbed, and here's what they're gonna do to restore it. They're just saying, here's our limits of disturbance on this project. And what I'm saying is, it's disturbed beyond, we know it's disturbed well beyond that, and they proved it. So if anything, shouldn't they be submitting a plan that shows all three lines or whatever to us, showing the limits of disturbance they want associated with this project in the long term, but we know that there were also disturbances.
All right,
I miss.
did you ask that during the hearing? Did you
I
bring that up?
asked for a complete restoration plan due to the extensive work in the wetlands that were cleared that didn't need to be, and that I considered them direct wetland impacts. I said that I know you're saying there's no direct wetland impacts on this project, but there are. Here's why, and here's what you need, here's what I would recommend you need to
Okay.
do, which is the
So the
restoration.
reason I'm asking you that is because if that is your reasoning for, let's say, your denial, you need, you know,
Had to
You
be
can't
part of
just,
the record.
you can't just come
Yes.
up with new
Right.
stuff at the
was that
deliberation,
not-
and
Was
it
that during
doesn't
the
sound
public
like you
hearing,
are.
or was that
It sounds like you did do it.
That was
at the-
during one of the public hearings.
Okay, and I think I recall
I
that.
do remember,
There's so many public hearings. It was one, I
It
think
was
it
in-
was your first meeting.
was
Yeah,
early,
it was my
Yeah,
first-
wasn't it?
It was either May or
I don't mean to be
June.
dense here, but can you just explain to me why it's not, like, I'm missing that, where you're saying it's beyond that, we know it's beyond that, and they're saying it's not.
Well,
Why-
they're admitting that their limits of disturbance are beyond the blue line, which is what
The
they came
previous
in.
limits of disturbance.
And they're not proposed, didn't I see a drawing earlier with plantings over there?
But doesn't that go back to my question of,
I didn't see, there wasn't a.
Yeah,
there
they,
weren't-
that was
There were-
within their limits of disturbance.
Can you bring that back up, what
Sure.
what they're actually proposing for restoration, for plantings in that area?
This is a really tough one.
I just don't think they're viewing it that way, because
They're
it was, which, and I don't know I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I think to Scott's point, without an actual survey telling us
Right.
what is there right now, so that we can compare it with what was approved previously, because something that could be done on a previous approval might have cleared more than we would have.
And Scott, that was in one of your comments, that you wanted a survey,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they haven't
A
provided.
survey of what they previously disturbed.
And he wanted a survey of the existing tree line.
When I looked at it out there, and I looked at, I looked at this
I got
plan
really
of comparison.
confused.
I mean, I'm an engineer, and I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
it's
It's
like,
way beyond my rate range.
I just,
there you
it's
go.
really hard
Right.
to,
It was definitely difficult to try to orient, and Jeff is probably best at doing the
Exactly, that's what
orienting
they're
because he does this all
Okay,
the
so
time.
he's got plantings all the way back up pretty much, but up there and up there from this,
Up
from the
here?
road up to where it branches out, that wetland, keep going up.
Straight up?
The wetland.
Up
Yeah. From that dash line all the way down. He cleared that area? He cleared all those wetlands and he cleared this corridor from like that dash line, maybe even a little further up.
Were you actually able to
Yeah,
trace that off or something,
so,
Jeff?
so he's saying,
I was
this,
up in the field nice.
this area
Jeff,
there,
if you come over, you can use
And
the
this
mouse
area.
and point exactly to where you're
I
saying.
didn't think about that.
That's all
So,
See, because
I
when I
wanted to
walked,
see him jump up and down.
yeah, yeah, so
I went on to the,
this is like, from here, wow, what's going
I'm
on?
sorry, I messed it.
Oh, okay, yeah, from here all the way down to here, that's been cleared, and this area all the way through here, right through this swath
Mhm,
is all cleared.
I agree, but I couldn't
And the
tell-
plantings are just, a couple,
Yeah, they're measly plantings, it's not, when I think of restoring something, I think of the
Well, when you
woods in
look
my
at-
backyard
right.
where they have 10 trees every 20 feet.
right, and when
No.
you're looking at this, it's
Every
not a
20.
restoration plan.
No, it's
This
a
is a
planting.
buffer, this is a slight buffer plan. So it doesn't answer the original concerning question I posed to solely at the public hearing.
Didn't mean to complicate things.
No, you didn't really. I mean, it's a complicated
Scott, are you
issue.
getting all this?
Huh?
Yes, it's all being recorded.
But the question is, what do we do about it?
Do we have any options
You,
besides denying their application outright?
well, you can't, unfortunately, you ran out of time. And the impression I got was because you ran out of time, you really didn't, I mean, if you weren't out of time, you would have been asking for more information.
Well, how about denial without prejudice? Because we don't have enough information. We had to close it last week. Isn't that what the proper procedure is? If you can't,
Well, the problem, I see the problem is that they had an approved plan, right?
Yep.
And I think we agreed that this is a better location for the road.
for them,
for an engineering, from
from
engineering
an engineering
standpoint.
point,
Well,
not
I
from a
thought it
wetlands
was a
standpoint.
smaller wetlands impact, well, now,
Um,
taking
Yeah,
the fact that
yeah.
they, less than it should have been, less than it was.
Yeah.
If they did it right the first time.
Well, the other location was further away from this vernal pool 3, and that was one of the issues as well, was being within the vernal pool envelope of.
And remember, now you're into the territory of the referral, and that is not only the road, but the lots.
Right.
You know, so you've got, the other part of your discussion here is the new layout better than the previous layout? And do you have any concerns about any of the lots or the layout of the road, that kind of thing? That's the other half of this.
You know, the whole lot layout thing is, can be somewhat quirky because, you know, you could have a lot and it might look acceptable, but they might come in and put something huge on it that no longer is acceptable, or vice versa. Like, we're looking at something today,
Well,
but another user can come in and say, oh, we're gonna scale this way down, and this lot configuration is perfect for them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
all
know
they have to do is demonstrate that the lot that they're creating
it's buildable.
is feasible to build on.
Well, I think that,
So, you know, like, I know that one lot that they were showing for the soccer use, the development was extensive on that lot. I mean, obviously, there's enough room on that lot to develop on that lot. So creating that size lot probably isn't an issue for you. You get, what I heard, you guys were concerned about what they were coming in after the fact.
Right.
And you warned them about that just because they showing you that initially doesn't mean that you're locked into that, you know, it looks like there's more feasible and prudent alternatives to what they're
Yeah.
showing you as
well,
what they'd like to do, which is an awkward thing to deal with after the fact.
I mean,
On
the other
that soccer thing?
Yeah,
Well, that's the reason why they're changing the whole road.
that's the reason why.
That's
they're
why we're
changing.
doing all of this.
And they were, you know, in fairness to them, they were very upfront about that.
Yes, they were. Mhm.
The other issue I had with the vernal pools.
But it created a significant, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
With the vernal pools and the fact that the salamander's gonna know how to travel that convoluted
Yeah.
path all the way around this facility through these private little areas underneath over the road
And they're
and.
gonna go around, they're not
Yeah.
gonna go over.
Well,
the
that
road.
was an issue, that's an issue that the Planning and Zoning Commission was discussing as well.
And I don't, I didn't have
And I
that.
have a question for Jeff. Now, I know this isn't part of the hearing, but this is a question that I came up with afterwards. The vernal pool that's off of lot 30 is encased in a wetland. Now, is the 100-foot envelope, does that have to be upland, or can that be partially wetland? Because if it's completely in a wetland, then the envelope doesn't mean anything.
No, that's a very good point. There is no distinguishing between upland and wetland in that 100-foot vernal pool envelope.
So it's all a matter of opinion.
Yeah, and usually, if it's a vernal pool, you do have uplands close by, because that's where they want to go for
Right.
most of their life.
Mhm.
So there could be these, you know, so-called cryptic vernal pools within red maple swamps.
That's what that one is.
And it could be species like frogs that use them because they're more mobile and can travel more than small-legged salamanders.
Mhm.
But I remember you asked something about that question, something about wetlands, and Bill Kenny was answering, or Kevin was answering something about that he didn't read anything in the literature about not using wetlands, for the salamanders, which,
Well, he read the same literature I did.
right, which is,
We
you
were
know.
both referring to the same literature.
Right, and, you know, even, but there's a couple things, I don't know how far I can get into it, but for clarification, just for the commission's knowledge, I looked at the regulations, and Bill Kenny, I think it was, said that we only, no, it was Kevin, said the regulations only look at 450 feet for around vernal pools.
That's wrong.
The regs are 500, but that's meaningless in terms of what we're asking for when we're talking about a significant impact activity, and you're asking for an environmental impact study. It's ecological, biological, it's chemical. It has nothing to do with just what we're looking at for the 500 feet. It's anything that could impact the pools. And court cases have shown if you impact wood frogs, their habitat, you're directly impacting the vernal pool. And so that's a biological impact. And so Bill Kenny was wrong when he said your charge here is looking at physical impacts to these resources. It's completely wrong. It's physical, chemical, and biological impacts to the wetlands. And that's why we're looking at the envelopes in critical terrestrial habitats.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, that's.
Yep.
Back to the matter at hand.
Right. Now, as far as the road construction, I mean, he's taking a huge amount of soil out of this.
Oh, yeah. Did you walk it, Jim?
No,
Oh, God. you
no,
should
but I mean,
see
it's
it.
just
The
unbelievable.
hill.
Yeah.
The
Is
hill's
is
gotta be
this
what, 40
minimized?
feet
I mean,
tall?
is he minimizing his excavation? The roads at the maximum slopes possible, or is he?
Yes, he's minimizing for this location, but there's other locations of the road that would minimize, that would reduce the excavation, such as the one that was previously approved did not have this much excavation.
But
I had commented.
I just personally, I don't think he'll build this thing unless he's got approved site plans for it. It won't make any sense.
I think that that's not an issue. I mean, that's the business that they're in, of excavating and crushing rock and selling it.
And-
Yeah, there's rock here too. They're gonna crush it and, just like they're doing in the quarry. I had made the comment about the hydrology changing when you're excavating to that magnitude.
Mhm.
That also was the comment that was put in the soils report about the vernal pool, the big vernal pool that didn't have the water in it anymore, and
Right, that was number 2.
they didn't provide additional information. I had requested additional information. They did not provide that, but I thought it was implied that really the reason for that was
They did address it. They said that that pool was off property and therefore not subject to our examination.
Yeah,
I
well,
think that's what it
you
is.
know, the reason I was bringing it up was because if one looks at the reasons why that changed, and you know, I was concerned that the reason is the change in grade, which changes the hydrology.
Mhm.
So if you change the grade elsewhere, what's that gonna do elsewhere? So, you're right, that was off-site, so they don't have to go into that. But to answer your question, Jim, the grade, they minimize the slopes.
For the path it shows.
Well, and in reality, those slopes are gonna be even greater when they go to develop the lots, so. You know, they're gonna cut that down even further.
You should really take a walk over there sometime.
And you were satisfied with the set of erosion controls for doing this excavation? For the most part?
From what I could tell, I mean, you really just have to get out there and it's a battle, you know how it is.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, You know, it's one thing looking at the plan, they put siltation control along the edges of the construction, and then you go out and you look at it. I mean, this is a large excavation.
It's huge.
I mean, you actually get out in the field, and you realize, oh, well, we need to put, you know, you need to
Taking
get
out
some
30
siltation
feet,
halfway down the hill, or,
Yeah, they do, because they got rills all over the place
Yeah.
that are going off into all kinds of in all kinds of directions. I don't know, I hate to believe it is any longer.
so let's circle back around.
Wait, how about we just take a 5-minute break, if that's okay? We're missing Jeff at the moment, and I would like to take a
Okay,
quick
sounds
one.
good.
Okay, Mr. Chairman?
Recess.
Quarter after
Okay.
10. I guess I'll
5
roll.
minutes. You okay?
I was gonna explode.
Oh, you can always request it.
Back to 36 Timothy Hill Road. Deliberations.
I was in the process of suggesting that you circle back around and maybe talk a little bit about the subdivision first.
All right, subdivision.
And we can approve the subdivision without the road?
I don't think so. We're not approving a subdivision, we're
Or
making referral
can we give a
comments.
positive referral to a subdivision without giving a positive referral to the,
Well,
or without approving a,
I guess you could, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
you could remember, you're talking to the Planning and Zoning Commission about, is the layout of the subdivision appropriate to minimize impact to wetlands? There may be some regulated activity associated with building the road that you have an issue with, but is the subdivision that they've laid out, have they demonstrated that that's minimizing impacts to wetlands?
I don't know how you say that you're minimizing impacts to wetlands with lot lines, honestly. It's hard for me to fathom that.
Because what happens is sometimes sometimes a developer will come in and they'll show a lot that isn't real practical to build on without impacting wetlands.
Because it's full of wetlands.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
I can see that.
like it's got too much wetlands or it's too skinny and you
Or
you
it
know.
puts a wall around a vernal pool.
Yeah, or, exactly. So it's your chance to comment about that. Usually you say right to the applicant during the hearing, hey, we don't like this lot, we want you to change it. And usually they'll change it if they're smart, but sometimes they don't for various reasons, and you're going to have a negative referral to planning and zoning then.
Yeah, which we didn't express a lot of,
Well, there was a lot of grief
Dissatisfied.
given about lot 30.
lot 30?
Yeah. there was a
Well,
lot of-
because of how they were proposing to develop it.
Well, yeah,
But
but
it is
that,
one of the better lots.
well, it is now because of its size, but,
Well, I mean-
with the potential plan that they presented to
Oh,
us.
it was horrible. I
Yeah,
agree with that,
it
but
was
I'm
very-
more concerned with 32,
But that's not what we're supposed to be looking at, I thought.
you know? That's the one that bugs
I
me.
mean,
The
yeah,
other
but
two,
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
you
I
could
know.
develop pretty easily. 32 is the only one that,
Yeah, 32 is kind of small. I don't understand why they didn't continue it down.
well, you couldn't use that area back there anyway, I imagine.
Let's see if I have the whole thing here. I got
Well, I
divested
guess that
myself
would be
of so
my
much
comment,
paper,
is that lot 32 maybe be combined with lot 30. One. Thank you.
Now, remember, if they have demonstrated that they can build on a lot, even if there's excess elsewhere in the lot, they've demonstrated that, hey, we can build on it. So just remember that too.
Yeah, they can build on it. My other issue is with the Lot 29. They've expanded this slice to be 150 feet the whole way up to the back portion of the lot, which satisfies zoning requirements of having to be able to put a box. What's the size of the box? 100 feet?
It's 150 by 150.
So a box, a building box has to be 150 feet by
Yeah, see
150 feet?
these, they show that's why they changed the property lines here, because Will pointed out to them that they couldn't fit a box over here. So they changed the property line, and now they have that box.
Yeah, but didn't they add more this last time around? They added another 13 feet or something to the rest of it to make it 150 all the way up?
Yeah, I think you're right, yeah.
But my problem with that is I would have a lot of trouble approving something. Now, this is a large industrial park. They are not going to build a 4x4 building on that 150-foot square. That is going to become a roadway or a driveway
Well,
to this
remember,
flag lot.
remember that if someone comes into you and shows a potential development plan that's only, let's say, using this area, and they come in with a huge area back here, you're not obligated to approve that. I mean, they've come in and they've showed you, hey, we can build over here and minimize impact to wetlands. If they came in with a big plan to do something way back here that was really large, you could say, well, you know, haven't you submitted a plan to us that shows a more feasible and prudent alternative? Ironically, what they're showing you for Lot 30 is just the opposite. They're coming in with the big plan originally,
Right.
and theoretically, it could be developed with something smaller. That's the first time I've ever seen someone do that, but.
Well, my other comment on that box is that 150-foot box that they could put in there, we wouldn't be able to approve a significantly sized building because of the fact that it is right next to a vernal pool
Okay.
and that there are significant wetlands. I mean, almost half of that thing is wetlands, and the entire thing is upland review. We would have a lot of trouble approving anything other than something about the size of a house on that lot, which would make that an impractical configuration. But I don't know how to express that.
Well,
Well, we did, I mean, during the, I feel like that concept was relayed during the discussions several times, don't you? I mean,
Yeah, but how do you relate it to P and Z?
well, again,
just
you
like
relay
you
it,
said it, I mean, it's,
you relay it to me, and then we come up with a draft.
But do you understand what I mean? Did the commissioners agree that, you know, they proved that they could put a building here, but would we be able to
practically
approve it?
speaking, is it, for a practical as a practical matter, it's, we could say something like, technically, yes, it's, we've shown could be built, but practically, given the use of the property and the zone, it doesn't seem feasible that, I mean, we could word it, I think, is my point. But it's,
We're not
I just
being
lost my train of thought.
bound by what they're showing as, when they come in, if they show us the exact same thing, it could still be denied.
The development of the lot.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is a concept.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
the only thing you can't do is if, once the development is approved, if someone comes in with a plan, eventually you have to approve something on that
Right.
lot, or else
It
you're
has to be
taking
a-
the lot.
Yeah.
If you think at this point in time that the lot is not practical, then you can state that. And that would be a reason why P and Z might deny it. As I said, a lot of times what happens is if the applicant hears that, they'll actually change it before they get to P and Z because they don't want to risk that. I didn't, to be honest with you, I didn't hear anybody saying that real strongly.
About lot 29?
I didn't hear any of you commissioners saying to them, hey, bring back a different plan, we don't like the layout of that lot. I didn't hear that. And so, you want to be
Unfortunately, I
careful.
wasn't here at the last two.
Yeah, you
so-
want to be careful,
Yeah.
like, if you
Right.
didn't
Oh, I agree.
express that at the meeting, and now you express it, you know, it's. you
I
wanna
just
be
said,
careful about
you know,
that.
I basically either do a vernal pool analysis, if they're showing us this, you know, and I went through it, I don't necessarily agree with some of the things that they said, but, at the same time, could be for another time when they're coming in for a permit. I mean, for whatever activity they wanna do.
So are you guys, what's your referral comment? Are you in favor of this subdivision layout? Are you in favor of moving the road to the location that they moved it and the shape of the lots? Or are you not, or do you have issues with it?
Well, due to the constraints of the vernal pools and their placement, it's very, I mean, I understand they're in a bind too. There's only so much you can do with the property. And of course, they're trying to maximize their profits out of it, which is not our concern.
Well, one way of looking at it is this layout better than the previous layout?
I was just gonna say that.
We don't have the previous.
I think, I mean, I can't remember why, but I thought I felt like it was better than the previous layout, as far as the road goes.
Well, it is a lot closer to the other three vernal pools than well, not a lot closer. It's closer, but not.
I mean, my only still concerned with lot 32, because a 12,600 square foot building is probably about as small as I could imagine someone building.
No, if they got a 9,600 square foot building up on.
Yeah, but that'll get a lot bigger.
They'll probably turn it into a construction yard anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
But,
Everything's a construction yard.
You know, on lot 32, they're not really showing stormwater management
No, nothing.
or anything.
Well, they can.
Well, they have a
because it's just a
little,
conceptual.
was that a
they
septic
don't-
tank or
I
a septic
think
field?
that's
Right.
septic, maybe.
Yeah, I just don't think that's.
But that's beyond what they would,
Yeah.
Yeah, but they'd have to put it somewhere, right?
I don't think we can, I don't know, I just feel like if we go too far beyond that, we're getting into.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
it shows
I
that
didn't hear anybody say anything about lot 32 during the hearing. And all of a sudden now it's,
Deep in our heads.
Yeah.
well, you gotta speak up during the hearing so that you can kind of get that out there.
My biggest beef was with lot 30. I think I mentioned 31. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the,
Yeah, but my only,
Listen to the
the only
testimony
issue with
again.
lot 30 is the development they put on it. I think it's easily developed.
I agree.
Now,
So-
let's see, you guys had to close the hearing. You've got 30, correct me if I'm wrong, you got 35 days to deliberate,
Right.
which means how far are they into?
We've already used up 2 weeks of it.
Yeah, because it's when they close the hearing,
Yeah,
start the
Okay,
deliberation.
so can they make it to the next meeting?
Yeah, their deadline is the next
Alright.
meeting.
So one idea is for you guys to think this through some more and come up with, it's, you know, I don't know, maybe you talk about tonight whether you're leaning toward denial or approval, and then maybe what you should do is think this through some more and come up with your reasons.
Well, I
Because
think
you're
we
gonna have
gotta,
to,
we
you're gonna
have to have you draft it for the next meeting.
right, but I can't draft it,
Yeah.
I can't pick your brain, you know
Yeah,
what I
we
mean?
have
Like,
to give him
you gotta give me,
suggestions. to
this
what-
kind of thing, you gotta give me, you know,
Yeah, well,
specific.
that's my only opinion. I would approve the subdivision with that one, whether you call it a condition or not, that lot 32 be combined with lot, what is it, 31.
But like Scott said, we didn't discuss that
Yeah,
in
we never,
hearings.
we never.
We can't bring up new.
It doesn't bother me.
Well,
because
it's
the reason-
when we get.
it's
The
litigated.
reason you
It's only attorney time.
The reason you were
And-
supposed to do
and-
that is because you, by discussing it during the hearing, you save the applicant we don't like that, we want you to change that. And it gives them the opportunity to do that.
Did we
In a
talk about it
perfect
in lot 30?
world,
It must have been lot 30.
I would agree with you,
It was
but we
definitely
did
more
have,
lots we talked about.
Oh,
We
yeah,
talked
30.
all
It
about
was
130.
30.
we talked about
30
the
and
vernal
29.
pools and
That's
how
all we
close
talked
it
about.
was,
Okay,
and,
Lot 30 was.
and how
my-
the little guys are gonna walk around, we talked all about that, so.
okay, yep.
I would still like to have more information. I just don't feel like it's finished.
Well,
As
you
put it, it's too late. No, it's maybe not, that's just it. You know, if we, depending on, I don't know.
So this, I'm looking at the minutes from.
Is there not enough information, or do you need to review it
Logistically,
more?
if we deny this application, they still have the other one they could just do, right?
Correct.
Except they've already gone into what they're hoping to, they've already gone into this area and already done all this work beyond the scope of the original plan.
Well,
Which they're
that's their
allowed to
issue.
do under the state statute.
Not the new plan.
No,
Oh, nothing, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm
They've
mixing
already
up plans.
cleared
They have
to
to have an
the new
approval.
plan, but they don't have the approval to do
Got it,
what they've
got it.
done already.
that would present another issue where we'd have to go in and get them to show us, well, you know, what have you done beyond, if anything, beyond what you had the approval for? I guess that comparison plan showed that. And then they'd have to come in with a remediation plan for that.
Well, that's what we were asking for.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we asked for several times. And they kind of hinted that maybe it was here, but I didn't really feel like we ever were presented with the plan that we were asking for. I don't know, I felt like we were rushed, even though we did this ad infinitum. There's still sections of the plan that I don't understand. There's portions that are cordoned off, and I don't know what they're for. I don't know whether, like this one that's got a curb cut on lot 31 with an access way that goes nowhere. So is the plan to later on subdivide lot 31 and make this a separate driveway? There wasn't enough time to cover everything.
I think he addressed this on the last one, if I
Did he?
remember correctly,
I
because
don't remember that.
he's showing, but he had.
There were parts of that tape you couldn't hear because he was too far away
Yeah, I think he addressed
from
that on the last
he
one,
was too
that they
far
were
away from the
gonna do this,
microphone.
but they were, I don't remember, but he did talk about it. I think somebody even asked, I think Jimmy even asked that. Did
I
you,
did.
on 29, why there was 2 curb cuts, was there gonna be 2 driveways going in?
that's way too, that's above me, I don't think I asked that.
You mean on lot 31?
Maybe. Does seem like a weird site design.
31.
It does, and it
Yeah.
leads me to believe that there's some other plans that are not being disclosed at this time for this other curb cut.
Well, they're probably trying to, there are those detention ponds, and it's weird. It's very
Oh, that's
weird.
right, the detention ponds, but they're only potential, they're
Yeah,
not
but-
real.
Even if they're
What-
showing 2 curb
what's
cuts,
not
it doesn't mean that,
The detention
get
ponds that
approved.
he was showing on lot 30,
Yeah, that's what
One.
I'm thinking that,
On lot
that without
31,
32,
right.
you could do something. I don't know what, but.
This pond over here?
no, that's a vernal pool, on the potential development plan.
Oh, okay, so, yeah, they were, that goes with the development of each lot, yeah.
Right, and it,
Okay, so what else we got? What are we gonna do about the road?
well,
We don't like the road?
I'm okay with the road myself, but want the restoration plan.
See, I don't know why we can't figure out a way to make a restoration plan part of a condition.
Because we have to tell them exactly what they would need to do.
Vision plans, it gets too complicated to tell them what, you know.
No, I understand it. Well, why can't they present us a restoration plan?
Because the
Because
hearing's
it's
over.
closed.
Well, I know that, but I mean, it's approved and they have to, there's one more little piece.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that
I
from the
know,
legal
I-
side of it,
them-
from the legal side
So
of it.
if we told them a mixture of wetland shrubs at certain spacing that they needed to do, but.
You're getting into dangerous territory,
I
right?
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I just hate to go back through all this again.
I know.
Because you
For
don't,
another-
you don't want a record that you're telling them what.
No, I don't wanna do that. I'm also trying to see, is there a smooth way of getting it through and getting kind of what we're looking for what we had requested
Well,
So
completed, but.
I mean, if we found out later, let's put it this way, if we approved it as is, and then it turned out that through further analysis, it was determined that they were outside of the limits of disturbance that were shown on the plans, what would we do about that?
Say that again? If they,
We approve it,
Well, you could.
because
do-
we're not quite sure
Mhm.
that this is just all speculation at this period. And then later on, when we're out there, we get our survey, we find out they're beyond the
we're not
limit
gonna
of
get a
disturbance.
survey.
What?
We're not gonna get a survey until we get an as-built. There's not gonna be any further information given to us.
they're just gonna.
Once
do their
we
thing.
approve it, that's it, we're done.
Oh, well, then, when they're done and we
I
see
see
that
what
they're
you're-
beyond it,
for-
what would we
it would
do
be
at
a
that
violation.
point?
You'd have
If it was
you'd
It'd
have
be a
a-
violation,
It'd be
they'd
a
have to,
violation.
they'd have to fix it.
You're right, you'd have a violation, they'd have.
And that would take another year or 2 or 3 or 4.
Just doesn't seem like there's any
He-
other choice.
But here's my concern, is that it's very clear from, I think it was the June meeting or July, that we asked for that wetlands restoration information. And then we had the meeting last week, and there was, we didn't really, I don't feel like we really brought it back up. So I would be, the concept I'm struggling with a little bit, because I kind of see.
I think you had the problem with not having continuity in the members that were here.
Right, yeah, yeah, which is,
Well, I know
unfortunate this
that,
fell in the summer, yeah.
I asked for it, at least I think, 90% sure that I asked for it again the following meeting, after that June meeting.
Well, I mean, we asked for it, but then we let it kind of go.
Yeah.
I guess is my point.
That's kind of,
So that's kind of our fault.
Well, how many times do you have to ask?
But
But
when
we
they
shouldn't
never,
have- we
when they
should-
never, when they never presented it, how did we let it go without?
we shouldn't have closed the meeting without it,
We
I
had to
guess.
close the meeting.
or we shouldn't, I don't know.
What you probably should have done is, when you were closing the meeting, because you, at that point, you know, you're out of time, maybe reiterate that, hey, you know, we never got this, and that. And that's gonna have an impact on our deliberation.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here at the last meeting. I had a whole lot of things in my head that I would have liked to have asked.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
I think what I would like to do would be to go back over the last, personally, would like to go back and listen to all of the hearings, one after the other. And really confirm what we did talk about, what we didn't talk about, what was asked, what was danced around. And, you know, really get a grip on what we did cover.
Okay.
That's a good point, like, you all have your own issues.
Yeah,
If you research that to see, well, how much did I talk about my issue? And then at the next meeting, bring that information, each one of you, to the table. Hopefully you can wrap it up then.
Yeah, but then can you still draft how do I say it, a sample
Yeah.
denial
A letter?
and a sample
Especially-
approval?
Yeah, right.
Just as a framework for us to work with?
Well,
Doesn't
we
have to have a lot
won't,
of-
well, we could just go back and do
You
it.
have 35 days to render a decision, and the 35 days starts at the close of the hearing, right?
Yeah,
That was
So,
last week.
We could
at
just
the
do
next meeting, how many
the way
days
we
will
used
it
to
be
do it.
on?
Yeah, why don't we just do it the way we used to do it?
That's
It's the end of the
We have
35
to have a
days.
decision next meeting.
So you would have to
Have to make a
vote
decision.
on it.
That's what I'm saying, so we need something.
But we did it
But
that
couldn't
way
we just,
for,
for the first year and a half I was on here, we did it the way where we didn't do the written decision.
you don't
So
have
we
to
could
have
just
it-
do it that
You
way,
don't have to have a draft.
right?
Okay.
Uh,
As long as we're very specific with our
Right.
conditions and our reasons, and,
Like, you
Then-
could, if you do your research and you have, let's just say each one of you had your reasons, and you brought them with you, you could literally read them into the record, and this is my reason, you know, and you don't have to have a draft.
Right.
okay.
But shouldn't you tonight at least tell each other where you're going with this? Like what direction you're headed in for both of those issues? Would that be helpful? So you know that you're not just wasting your time working on,
Well, I think
some
it-
people are working on an approval and some people are working on a denial.
Well, I'm kind of balancing what,
Or
How
you're
it
not
goes.
there yet.
well, my own issue is the amount of disturbance to the wetlands. And
And the
that they're just gonna
remediation.
walk, like, it's just gonna be forgotten about, and that they did it, they impacted them, and that's it. And any other site, that's a major violation, they'd be doing restoration plans and fixing it all up.
You know, just one thing along those lines, I remember you bringing that up, and I remember them saying that those wetland corridors really didn't, you know, didn't have trees in them. They didn't have much in them. It was high, you know, there was a high canopy around these wetland areas, but the actual wetlands didn't have trees growing in them.
I don't remember that conversation, but you can see the stumps that they
Okay,
cut
all right.
out there. You could see the tracks, you could see the grubbing that they did in some of the grading, some of the excavations, so it's, regardless, it's disturbed, so,
All
Well,
right, so you've got your clear direction that you're,
so where you like to go?
I have a hard time approving it when there's a major, what I think is a major issue that's unresolved. They didn't provide it, wasn't at the last meeting to push the issue, so does that mean they can go without?
even if you were at the last meeting to push it, it would have been too late. We had to close it.
But it would have been brought up again. I don't know. It'd been like, where's the restoration plan? You're still impacting wetlands and it's not,
You did ask that again the next time you were at the meeting.
well, I mean, the last,
I know
before
you
you
did the
closed it.
first time, but you also
Mm.
asked it
Yeah,
like
but
a meeting or
if
two
you-
later.
To me, if you ask it once, that's enough. It's enough that's a record.
Well, he also said that he would fix it right away. I mean, I have his exact words written down here. It would be taken care of immediately, or something to that effect.
But
And
I
I
also
just-
think I don't know, I'm not articulating this right, but I think there's a conceptual difference of opinion as to what it is that they are required to, I guess, restore or show because of the previous approval. Does that make sense? Like, I
Yeah,
think that
know
there's
what
just,
you're saying. Mhm.
like, they're not, so I think he might,
They're under the impression that they did it, you know, when they started this, they had the permit to do that, and now they're changing it.
right.
But, you know, to Jeff's point, he did ask him twice.
And
What are you
then he
gonna do to
did
fix
And
this?
he did admit it, care of it right away.
Okay, but then, so,
But it
is that
didn't
enough
happen.
to deny the
Well,
application?
if you deny without
Because
prejudice,
we as a commission did we as a commission push hard enough for that information?
how hard does the commission have to push?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
it's not you're not gonna get a clear answer on that.
Right, I know,
Well,
yes.
Plus what they
I
showed.
guess it's not
us.
serious, so I'm like, do we feel
Yeah,
like we did enough to get that information,
Yes.
and they didn't, then that's I mean, to me, that's clearly a reason to deny the application. If we as commission feel like we did enough to ask for that information, they didn't provide it, then then that is clearly a good enough reason to deny application from a
So,
wetland state.
okay, so on the road, you guys are leaning toward a denial, and the first thing is, you don't think that they provided the enough requested remediation.
And I'm gonna tag on to your A2 survey requirement for the limits of disturbance.
Okay, so didn't provide requested,
You know that they're just gonna turn on. Use them in the
survey
application
information,
with
survey
remediation.
info,
They're just
to
gonna turn on, take all this
verify,
information and give it back to them.
limits of disturbance.
Okay.
And anything else about the road system that you have an issue with?
Issue. There's some things that they wouldn't be denial points, though, they would just be conditions, I think. There are some things I wanted to
You would,
bring up. I just continue to have more questions about about the curb cuts, about the potential for what they're doing for the lots, and chance to talk about the different lots, other than lot 30, which was my bone of contention from the beginning, and 29. It's, all of them have something that's just, even
right, you're
lot
talking about the
31.
subdivision now.
I'm talking about both, yes.
Talking
you're
about the
right.
road.
You're right, we're talking about the road. The curb cuts having to do with the road.
Now, do these salamanders, are they able to cross the road?
Yeah, they got Cape Cod curbing.
Yeah, they're able to
They
cross
have no
it,
problem with that.
they get squished.
Apparently not.
One of the major problems that's gonna happen is
Scurry
that
right across?
this is going to be, now, it is going to be one of the few east-west roads in Monroe that will connect one side to the other. This is going to be a very heavily traveled road until we discover it. And all of these crossings are going to be death zones. Which is one of the reasons I was pushing so hard for the corridors and for channels and
Well,
things that
remember,
being in the right
remember
place.
too, Lois, that, okay, that's something else. I was gonna say, just keep in mind that you guys approved the concept of a road and.
Yes, oh yeah,
connecting all that stuff.
I'm not denying that. I was a little happier though with the swales along the side of the road instead of storm drains and curb, catch basins, which, that all changed. There used to be swales, which were a lot more friendly. Catch basins are not friendly. This is a significantly different concept than the old one was. And I know that some of it's a engineering thing. You guys like your catch basins and curbs and
Well,
all
you're
that stuff.
taking the risk, you
so.
deny this, and you get the old one.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what they want to do. Not that it matters. I mean,
Well, it's
yes,
not-
if
they
we denied
stated
it,
that.
then they could do
told you
whatever
it's
they
not
want.
what they wanna do.
Right.
Yeah,
This
they
whole
wouldn't
thing is-
be here.
This whole thing is being done because they have a new potential tenant that
Exactly.
they wanna satisfy.
Who's got some
And
big
the only way to do it is to move the
soccer
road.
fields, which is the one thing we don't like.
The what?
I said, they got big soccer fields, which is the one thing we don't like.
No, we have no problem with the soccer fields. It's just that its proximity and the development that comes right up to the wetland. So anyway, if we can put it off until next time, I'll listen to my tapes and see what, if everybody else can do the same. Then we can all get a.
The videos are also up on the website.
Right. The only problem, I don't know, are the recordings better than the videos? Because every time somebody, rustles their paper or, and we have a lot of this. We have an awful lot of that, and you can't hear over that. And then when people aren't talking.
You and Jen.
Me?
You're the two
I don't know what you guys
befores.
are talking about.
It's so hard to
I think if you wanna hear it, you should be sitting here.
All right.
with the
Then I-
rest
So
of
we
us.
tabling
I will,
until,
I will not do that. Nobody's gonna have a big.
So,
Because I'm not listening.
so
I'm not
everyone's
watching
gonna try to
movies.
come up with,
They're awful.
you guys gotta come up with some pretty detailed reasons if we're gonna go without the draft.
Okay, well, I'm voting to approve it, so.
God's killing me. All right, so you talked a little bit about the road, you have the issues with the road, you're looking at a denial, and then the subdivision referral. I guess the same thing, just go through that and come up with, detail.
We're not allowed to make suggestions on changing lot configurations that we didn't discuss at the hearing?
You can still say to the Planning and Zoning Commission that you think certain lots should be tweaked. I just, you really should, in my opinion, for lot changes, you should press for that during the hearing. Because it gives the applicant the opportunity to, yes, okay, we'll change that for you. Or no, we're not gonna change that.
That's pretty much what we heard.
You did press for a change to that big lot, the soccer lot, and they basically told you, no, that's what we want, we're gonna come in with that.
Because if we were to change lot 29's access way and move it up this way more, and change the size of lot 30, we could make lot 30 this way, and it might be better, I don't know. I don't know. But maybe it might also be too much driveway, I don't know.
You bring up a good point in that if you're saying that,
11 o'clock.
one thing you look at, why doesn't this go? If they got this big lot here, right? And then they got, the vernal pool is here, and then they got this small little box here. What you're saying is that, forgetting about development that they want, if you move this property line over to here and still had a very viable lot here, this lot would then become much wider, and now you got a viable lot here, and you can move the building further away from the wetland. Is that what you're saying?
No, that wasn't what I was saying, but that's another way of looking at it. I was talking about moving the access way of lot 29 to the other side of lot 30.
Oh, well, okay, right, so you're saying take this and move it way over here.
But I don't know how practical that would be either. I know they're working with gradients and they're working with contours and all that other stuff, so, but that's not my problem. Nor is it my knowledge.
All right, so my only question to you guys is that you gotta come prepared to the next meeting, because there's not gonna be a draft. You're gonna have to make a motion and,
vote on it.
you're gonna have to vote on it, and it's gonna have to be very clear. Especially since if you go in the route of denial, it's gotta be very clear, so that we can get that, the conditions and the reasons verbatim.
But can you bring the
Standards?
yeah,
A standard? Yeah, I can do that. Why don't we get?
the boilerplate?
So we've got, you're
So we
asking, at the moment, you're leaning toward a denial. I've got the two reasons for the road denial.
Yeah.
I could put my wording in there, and I'll get the rest of the layout of the
There
letter
you
done.
go. That's all I'm looking for.
On the subdivision referral, I'll get the guts of that done too. The letter, its comments, you're gonna have to add in.
Okay.
And it sounds like that one you're not as sure about. You're kind of back and forth. I mean, obviously, if you deny the road, the referral's a moot issue. If you think about it.
Because it's
Because
gotta revert to the old
they
plan
can't,
at that
if they
point.
don't have an approval on the regulated activity, they don't have a subdivision. So, that's gonna kill it. So, I could find out if the referral, if you're denying the regulated activity, is a referral even needed? May not even be needed.
It seems moot, wouldn't it be, what's the point of it? What would be the point of it?
Right.
Well,
As well.
one point of it would be to, express to them the problems you have with the layout, so that when they come back in,
Right.
they know.
If we denied without prejudice, because we didn't have enough information, there's two major pieces of information that I feel I need on the road to approve it, only because our field observations are significantly different than what they're telling us is true. And if we had those pieces of information, that would make it easier to decide whether, it would give us more time to ask and get what we're looking for without, we're not pulling it apart, we just want more information that we couldn't get, despite being asked for. So that would be what
All right,
more
well-
reasons do you need?
Well, we got the two reasons, but I'm just saying, do what you were saying, listen.
Yeah,
and
I'm
think it
going
through,
to, for sure.
Provide that at the next meeting.
Mhm. I'll give up a week of my life.
All I'm saying to you is, I'm not hearing anything on the subdivision, you're just gonna have to resolve that, each of you have to resolve that and bring that to the next meeting, because I'm not hearing anything specific.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's do that, we'll all do the best we can. And it's 11:05, what else we got left on here?
You've got the.
We have quite a bit, but we have one more deliberation.
Oh, we do?
We
Yeah,
do?
the 124
124
Enterprise, which
Enterprise.
has got
We
that
can delay that.
tricky-
We just closed it tonight, we can delay it till next time.
No, what?
No?
No,
We
the-
closed this
No,
last
you
time.
have a
No,
draft approval.
the meeting
Oh,
closed.
that's
have
a
to vote
draft
on it.
approval.
But the
That's right.
decision deadline is 9/27, and there is a draft approval,
Wait.
but you can postpone it till
Okay,
next.
let's postpone it.
But
Okay,
we
we
But
already
it's
have the
only-
draft
it's
approval.
only
I
just
thought-
have to vote on
Okay.
it.
It's
Correct.
a
Move that we
quickie.
approve it as
Well,
drafted.
there's a timing issue on that.
All right, so if you wanna do it, I gotta explain a few things, and we gotta go through the draft. You
Yeah,
okay with
maybe
that?
Or
we
you can
delay
do
it.
Huh?
Thought we could do it next meeting.
You can, you have till the
7,
you have till the
It's the same
27th to
one,
make a
same thing.
decision.
Same time it is. This one.
right. So it's up to you guys, if you wanna table it, or,
It's 11 o'clock, let's go.
Well, somebody make a motion then.
Motion for what?
to table the rest of the agenda.
Is there anything that's crushing? Time extensions or, et cetera?
Let's see, time extension. Yeah, we got, I'm gonna do the other stuff real quick, okay? You
There
got,
is no such thing as real quick, Scott.
yeah, it is, 111 Blanket Meadow Road, they need an extension to complete the work, they're doing the work right now, they started today.
So moved.
Okay, so that's,
Second.
I'm gonna give them 30 days. Okay,
They
do I hear a
wanted
vote?
it to October 31st.
October 31st.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Aye.
That's 6 weeks.
45 days or whatever.
That's,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Turkey Roost, they need an
Passes
extension
unanimously.
because they were on vacation, they couldn't pull it together in time for tonight's meeting.
Have they had any?
The original deadline was 9/13, which
Which was-
was today. Let's give me another 30. Have they had any
No,
previous? Okay, how about another 30?
How long do they want? Get 30 more
they
days?
did not say.
30 days.
30 days.
So moved.
Second.
All in
All right.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
All
under agent,
opposed? Passes unanimously.
I got a bunch of items under agent approval, just read them. If you don't have any issues, that's what we approve for agent approval. Permitted uses as of right, we have a 15 Vincent Drive, they've got a bunch of trees, they're all dead, and they want to cut them down in the wetland area along the edges of their yard. We prepared a permitted use as of right, and they need a jurisdictional ruling that it's okay to take it down.
Sounds good.
Agent approval.
You all in agreement with that?
Yep.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay, so you've just made your official jurisdictional ruling that it is a permitted use as a road.
As long as it's only the dead ones.
Yes, okay, it is. Okay, you already did 1603, 1615, I'm not gonna go into the administrative review, we'll do that at the next meeting, and that's everything other than the 124, and you're saying you'll table the 124 vote until the next
September
meeting.
22nd.
One thing on that, can you please read my paragraph that I put about the timing? Because I'm having a problem with developments, remediation that is also development activity, and how to handle the two different things. So what I did with that is I shortened up the time so that it gave them a little more time to do the remediation, but less time to do the, meet the conditions of
Okay.
approval for the other. So read that paragraph in preparation for this.
So we're not gonna go over the agent approvals, we'll do
I
that
just,
next
no,
time.
the agent approvals, we listed them on the
Read them to
agenda,
ourselves.
and that's enough.
They're fine.
Okay, that's fine,
Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
okay.
Meeting's adjourned.